Chapter 6:15. Hu Po's awakening and the increase in the strength of one spirit and one tiger were undoubtedly the only good news recently. He had the 9-front formation in her hands. The stronger she was, the more power she could unleash from the 9-front formation. For example, if Yi had been able to unleash more of the 9-front formation's power, Lu Yi might not have had to work so hard. On the other hand, Hu Po and Lu Yi had formed a life origin technique and a beast mark technique. In battle, Lu Yi could borrow strength from Hu Po. And once the beast transformation secret technique was activated, the stronger Hu Po was, the higher Lu Ye's limit would be. It could be said that Hu Po's increase in strength was equivalent to Lu Ye's increase in strength. These two companions were rare helpers by Lu Ye's side. In the entire cultivation world of the 9 provinces, they were unique. Recently, there were traces of cultivators outside the heavenly spirit land. Obviously, they were cultivators from the Myriad Devil Ridge who had received the news and rushed here first. However, it was still early, so not many people came. It could be foreseen that as time passed, more and more cultivators would rush here. Although these cultivators had received news about Lu Yi, they didn't dare to act rashly before confirming it. They only secretly investigated the surroundings of the heavenly spirit land. Unfortunately, the heavenly spirit land was shrouded in a concealment array. No matter how they investigated, they couldn't find any clues. It wasn't until several days later that a cultivator finally couldn't bear it anymore. He flew straight to the sky above Heavenly Spirit Valley and raised his hand to cast a spell downward. As the spiritual power surged, the concealment array lost its effect. In an instant, the situation of the entire Heavenly Spirit Land was imprinted in everyone's eyes. There were several wooden houses scattered about, and a spirit spring was gurgling out of it. In front of one of the wooden houses, a person was casually sitting on the floor with a long saber beside his leg. His gaze was indifferent as he looked at the figure in the sky. For eyes met. The spell cultivator who cast the spell observed with rapt attention. He was overjoyed. Lu Yi. Although they had rushed here based on the news they had received, no one could be sure whether this was Lu Yi's hiding place unless they saw his whereabouts with their own eyes. At this moment, when the concealment array disappeared and Lu Yi's figure was truly revealed, the cultivators of the Myriad Devil Ridge were all excited to see him, whether they were in the open or in the dark. The news was true. This was indeed where Lu Yi was hiding. Just as the spell cultivator was getting excited, more than 10 figures hiding in the dark flew over. Now that he had found Lu Yi's whereabouts, he naturally had to strike first to gain the advantage. There was only one Lu Yi, and whoever killed him would get the reward. However, not everyone charged out. Most of them chose to observe. In the spiritual land, Lu Yi raised his hand and pointed his palm at the magic cultivator hovering in the air. Faxiu was still immersed in the joy of discovering Lu Yi's whereabouts. When he saw Lu Yi's actions, he had no idea what Lu Yi was going to do. Just as he was puzzled, Lu Yi suddenly clenched his hand. It was as if he had imperceptibly grasped Faxiu's entire body in his palm. Then, he waved his hand and said indifferently, "Get down here." The moment he finished speaking, the spell cultivator who was suspended in midair felt as if a huge mountain was pressing down on him. He was like a bird with broken wings falling straight down in shock. The sudden turn of events caused him to panic. He cried out in alarm and madly urged his spiritual power to stabilize his body. However, at this moment the clear sound of a sword rang out. Flying swords flew out from another wooden hut. Wrapped in an icy chi of death, they accurately attacked the magic cultivator who was dancing with joy. Thud thud thud. The spell cultivator's protective spiritual power lasted for less than a breath before it was broken. The flying swords pierced through, causing blood to spurt out. Miserable screams echoed endlessly in Huitian Valley. Plop, the spell cultivator fell to the ground but did not die immediately. His mouth and nose were full of blood, and many of his bones were broken. There were more than 10 flying swords piercing through his body. Before he could regain his senses, a shadow covered him. He opened his blurry eyes and saw that Lu Yi, who had been sitting in front of the house, had unknowingly walked in front of him and was looking down at him. The spell cultivator was terrified. He instinctively wanted to urge his spiritual power, but Lu Yi stepped on his chest. The heavy blow caused him to spit out blood, and the spiritual power he had painstakingly gathered dissipated. Lu Yi raised his saber. The pitch-black mountain saber flashed with a sharp luster. "Wait," the spell cultivator whispered. But before he could say anything, the saber had already stabbed down. The saber pierced through his chest and came out from his back, directly taking his life. The spell cultivator's body twitched a few times before he stopped breathing. Lu Yi bent down and took the spell cultivator's storage bag. Then he kicked the corpse out of the spirit land. He shook off the blood on his mountain saber and coldly looked at the dozen figures floating in the distance. When they met his gaze, their scalps went numb. Although the spell cultivator who attacked just now had only used one technique, from the spiritual power fluctuations around him, he was a ninth-order spell cultivator. A ninth-order spell cultivator was the limit of the Cloud River battlefield. He could be considered a master anywhere. However, such an expert had actually died here without knowing what had happened. From beginning to end, other than someone using their flying sword to help, Lu Yi had only used one saber strike. Naturally, they didn't think that the ninth-order spell cultivator had died at Lu Yi's hands. He had died so miserably because he had been too careless. Recalling what had happened to the spell cultivator, someone frowned and whispered, "A space sealing array." It didn't make sense for a ninth-order spell cultivator to suddenly fall down. There was no other explanation other than a space sealing array. They had long heard that Lu Yi's attainments in the Tao of Arrays were extremely high, but they didn't expect him to be so high that he could even arrange a space sealing array. The news they received didn't mention the existence of a space sealing array. When Tu Guanxiong spread the news, he didn't know whether it was intentional or not, but he omitted this information. The dozen or so 10,000 demons-rich cultivators who had rushed over were now filled with joy. Fortunately, they weren't fast enough. Otherwise, once they entered the range of the space sealing array, they would have followed in the spell cultivator's footsteps. As for why Lu Yi didn't wait for them to enter the range of the space sealing array before activating it, it was understandable. It wasn't that he didn't want to do so, but that he didn't dare. Using the opportunity created by the space sealing array, it wouldn't be difficult to kill a ninth-order spell cultivator, but if a dozen or so people were to break in, even if he could kill a few of them, the rest would be troublesome. The current situation was the best way to deal with it. Killing one person would deter the rest. The death of a ninth-order spell cultivator made the rest not dare to act rashly. Glancing at the dozen or so people indifferently, Lu Yi raised his hand and the concealment array activated again. With a ripple, the entire spirit land disappeared from everyone's sight. The dozen or so people looked at each other for a while, then silently retreated. Although a ninth-order spell cultivator had died inexplicably, the news that Lu Yi was hiding here had been confirmed. Moreover, some people saw the traces of Li Baxian and Feng Yuchan. The flying sword that had attacked the spell cultivator was controlled by Li Baxian. The news continued to spread, and the outside of returning Sky Valley gradually became lively. Usually there was no one here, but now there was a hubbub of voices, and traces of cultivators could be seen everywhere. Some cultivators who were familiar with each other gathered in groups of 3 or 5, discussing how to kill Lu Yi safely and effectively to obtain the huge bounty. There were also masters who were arrogant and isolated, looking around coldly. The cultivators of the Holy Eve's Spirit Land returned under Mingzhi's lead, but they didn't gather together. Instead, they were divided into several teams and scattered around. Looking at the bustling entrance of returning Sky Valley, Mingzhi sighed and let out a long breath. He was heartbroken that the Holy Eve Spirit Land had suffered too many losses before, and even his senior brother Huoliao Yuan had died at the hands of Lu Yi. But now, more than 300 cultivators had gathered from all over the Myriad Demon's Ridge, and those who dared to come here were all 6th-order cultivators and above. With such a force, even if they just pushed their way through, Lu Yi would definitely not be able to resist. He would definitely die. As such, senior brother Hu could rest in peace. Looking in the direction of returning Sky Valley, Mingzhi's eyes were filled with joy, as if he was about to get his revenge. However, the development of the situation was somewhat different from what he had expected. More and more Myriad Demon's Ridge cultivators gathered here, and there were even many 9th-order masters from 1st-grade sects and 1st-grade sects, but no one attacked returning Sky Valley. Everyone seemed to have secretly reached a tacit understanding, and they were all watching. Mingzhi gradually came to his senses. The Holy Eve's spiritual land no longer had any hopes of obtaining the bounty on Lu Yi's head. They only wanted to kill with a borrowed knife and avenge their dead brothers. However, the cultivators who had rushed over for the sake of profit were different. Every one of them had their eyes on the huge bounty. After learning that returning Sky Valley was shrouded in a space-restricting array, no one dared to act rashly. Wuxia could even arrange a space-restricting array, so who knew what other strange spirit arrays he had in his spirit land? At this time, whoever stood out would be unlucky. To put it simply, everyone's hearts were not united. They all hoped that others would make the first move to test the heritage of returning Sky Valley, so that they could secretly pick up the scraps. Mingzhe was angry at first. They clearly had the power to flatten everything, but they schemed against each other, which was really disappointing. But on second thought, he could understand the mentality of these masters. After all, they did not have that much hatred with Wuxia. Moreover, the bounty on Wuxia's head was so huge that they had to be careful in order to increase their success rate. But if this continued, how could they kill Wuxia? Mingzhe's worries were obviously unnecessary. How could others not think of what he could think of? Just as he was worrying about gains and losses, a figure suddenly stood up and flew into the air, immediately attracting everyone's attention. Chapter 6:16. The one who stood out was a man who looked to be in his 20s, but the spirit energy fluctuations on his body were already at the level of a Cloud River Realm 9th Order. Being able to have such a cultivation at such a young age undoubtedly meant that his background and aptitude were extremely good. The man was handsome and had an extraordinary temperament. What was rare was that he didn't have the slightest bit of arrogance and aloofness of someone from a big sect. Instead, his face easily gave people a kind of amiable feeling. The faint smile on his face made people feel like they were bathing in a spring breeze. He flew into the air and hovered about 10 feet above the ground. Seeing that he had attracted the attention of the nearby cultivators, he spoke in a gentle tone, "Fellow cultivators from all over the 9 states, Song Jue greets you." As he said this, he turned in a circle with his hands clasped in front of him, looking very polite. Immediately, a soft whisper came from somewhere in the crowd, "It's Song Jue from Abyss Rainbow Hall." In the cultivation world of the 9 states, there were new talents in every generation, and the new generation replaced the old. There were so many cultivators present. Some might not know who Song Jue was, but everyone knew about Abyss Rainbow Hall. After all, it was a first-grade sect. When Lu Yi had just stepped into the cultivation world, a woman had told him that the top 10 first-grade sects of the War Province were divided into 1 palace, 2 temples, 3 sects, and 4 sects. Abyss Rainbow Hall was one of the 2 temples. As a disciple of Abyss Rainbow Hall who was active in the Cloud River battlefield, Song Jue was actually quite famous, but after all, not everyone knew him. However, it didn't matter whether they knew him or not. He was a Cloud River Realm 9th Order and a disciple of Abyss Rainbow Hall. These 2 identities were enough. With a warm smile still on his face, Song Jue opened his mouth and said, "Fellow Taoists, you have all rushed here from all over the battlefield." This Song Jue won't go into detail as everyone is well aware of the reason. This Song Jue is fortunate enough to stand here today, and only wishes to say a few words of criticism. The smile on his face slowly disappeared, and he became serious. Since ancient times in the spiritual stream battlefield, the Yunhe battlefield, and even the cultivation world of the 9 states, the Wanmo Ridge and the Haotian Alliance have been fighting against each other. It's understandable that the cultivators each have their own standpoints. For so many years, the blood feud between them has been like the east wind suppressing the west wind, and the west wind suppressing the east wind. There has never been a clear winner. But ever since Wuxia appeared in the Jade Blood sect, the situation seemed to have changed subtly. In the Spirit Stream battlefield, many fellow Taoists from the Myriad Devil Ridge died because of him. Many sects suffered heavy losses because of him, especially the Inner Circle and the Core Circle. I heard that dozens of sects in the Inner Circle were destroyed by him. I didn't dare to believe it, but it happened. Then there's the Core Circle. The sects stationed in the Core Circle are all grade 3 and above. Each sect has a large number of talents. In the past, it might not be possible to destroy a single grade 3 sect's encampment in several years. However, since Wuxia stepped into the Core Circle, he has destroyed dozens of Core Circle encampments. Twice in a row, the Core Circle sects were forced to pay up to avoid disaster. At this point, Song Jue's face was filled with grief and indignation, and his expression became agitated. To tell you the truth, this song comes from Abyss Rainbow Hall. Perhaps many of the fellow Taoists present here belong to one of them. This is a disgrace to us. A disgrace to the entire Myriad Devil Ridge camp. The large sects in the core circle had been extorted by Lu Yi twice, and were forced to pay him for their safety. Although this was not a secret, few Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators spoke of it in public. They couldn't afford to lose face. But today, Song Jue spoke of this matter unscrupulously, and the effect was surprisingly good. Many people in the crowd listened with gloomy expressions. Cultivators were sect cultivators, and sects were the face of cultivators. How could cultivators remain indifferent when their sects were humiliated? It could be said that some of the Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators gathered here were here for the bounty on Lu Ye's head, but more were driven by hatred. We are all indebted to our sects and have been carefully taught and cultivated by our elders to achieve what we have today. When our junior brothers and sisters were bullied, we were not there. When our sects were humiliated, we were not there. When our sects were forced to compromise, we were still not there. Song Jue's voice gradually became louder, and the warm smile on his face had long been replaced by a resonant anger. He waved his hand and shouted in a low voice, "We can't interfere in the matters of the Spirit Stream battlefield. But this is the Cloud River battlefield, and Lu Ye is here." He suddenly pointed in the direction of Huitian Valley. "He's there. He's looking at us from there and laughing at us. He's laughing at us for scheming against each other even though we have the numbers. He's laughing at us for not taking the initiative to step forward despite having the power to flatten everything. He's laughing at us for being a plate of loose sand." In the crowd below, Mingzhi's blood was boiling as he listened. He clenched his fists and wished he could cheer loudly. Song Jue's words had spoken to the bottom of his heart. "I think your sects don't want to see him grow, or else they wouldn't have issued so many bounties. Also, according to the various information I've obtained, Lu Ye has set up many formations in this spiritual land, especially the Forbidden Sky formation. A fellow Taoist lost his life because of it a few days ago. In addition, there are nearly 300 demon wolves in this spiritual land, and they can't be underestimated. Of course, with so many of us, we already have enough power to crush them. However, I want to remind everyone that you must still be careful. Although the bounty is good, you still need to be alive to enjoy it. As for the bounty after killing Lu Ye, I'll calculate it in advance. All the fellow Taoists who participate in this matter will share Lu Ye's bounty equally. Of course, I need someone to help me. If there's a clever junior sister who's willing to help me, you can come and find me." As soon as he said this, many people were shocked. They really didn't expect Song Jue to make such a decision. Lu Ye's bounty was indeed huge, but if it was divided equally among so many people present, it was nothing. At most, it could be considered a windfall. It was better than nothing. Moreover, Song Jue was right. The main purpose of killing Lu Ye this time was not for the bounty, but to eradicate a disaster for the Myriad Demons Ridge. The bounty was secondary. Moreover, with so many people acting together, there was basically no risk. The bounty was given for free. At the entrance of Huitian Valley, the scattered cultivators of the Myriad Demons Ridge gathered their hearts because of Song Jue's words. Although some of them were unwilling, it was difficult for them to resist the general trend. Song Jue said a few more words, but it was nothing more than exhorting the cultivators of the Myriad Demons Ridge to pay attention to protect themselves. This made everyone feel that he was a good person. After Song Jue landed, a few female cultivators took the initiative to find him. With Song Jue's arrangement, the female cultivators excitedly began to count the names, backgrounds, and even sex of the cultivators who participated in the attack on Huitian Valley. Although there were many cultivators of the Myriad Demons Ridge, the efficiency of the female cultivators was very high. In less than an hour, a few jade slips appeared in front of Song Jue. He smiled warmly at the female cultivators. "Junior sisters, you've worked hard." The female cultivators had different reactions. Some smiled, some were shy and silent, and some took the initiative to exchange battlefield imprints with Song Jue. Song Jue naturally agreed. After dealing with the female cultivators, Song Jue checked the contents of the jade slips. A voice suddenly sounded beside him. Don't you feel guilty for doing this? There was only the voice and no figure. Even if someone passed by Song Jue, he didn't notice anything. Song Jue lowered his head and his mouth moved slightly. You're definitely not the only ghost cultivator hiding. You'd better not let others succeed. Wuxia, I joined forces with you because I trusted you. I also tried my best to encourage this group of people. Don't let me down. Chapter 6:17. If the cultivators of the Cloud River battlefield were to be ranked on a list, Lu Yi would definitely be at the top of the list. As early as in the Spirit Stream battlefield, his actions had even attracted the attention of many Spirit Sea Realm cultivators. The huge bounty issued by the major sects of the Myriad Devil Mountain Range made most of the cultivators in 9 regions have heard of Lu Ye's name. After Lu Yi, there were Li Baxian and Feng Yuchan. Perhaps in the entire cultivation world of the 9 states, their fame was not too outstanding, but in the Cloud River battlefield, they were still very famous. After all, which of these Cloud River realm cultivators had not come from the Spirit Stream realm? Which one of them had not looked up to these 2 malignant tumors of the Spirit Stream battlefield? Below them were cultivators like Song Jue, who had a good background, a good cultivation, and a little fame. Wuxia could also be considered in this level. Although very few people had seen his true face, many people had heard of his name, especially the cultivators of the 10,000 Demon Ridge, and especially the ghost cultivators, because just 2 months ago, Wuxia used his Cloud River 9th Order cultivation to kill a true Lake Realm cultivator in the War Province's chaotic sky plains. Killing a true Lake Realm cultivator in the Cloud River battlefield was a magnificent feat, although the true Lake Realm cultivator had been injured. When the news spread, it was still shocking. This was no longer a matter of killing an enemy above one's realm, but killing an enemy above one's realm. Looking at the history of the 9 states, there were countless cultivators who could kill an enemy above their realm, but there were very few who could do so. The main reason Wuxia could do this was because he was a ghost cultivator. Moreover, he was a ghost cultivator from the San Luo Temple. The War Province had 10 first-grade sects, 1 palace, 2 temples, 3 sects, and 4 sections. One of the 2 temples was the Yuanhong Temple that Song Jue came from, and the other was the San Luo Temple that Wuxia came from. The San Luo Temple was a very special sect. 70 to 80% of the cultivators in the sect were ghost cultivators. It was also the most difficult sect to deal with in the 9 states. For example, the North Profound Sword sect and the Wild Saber sect only cultivated in one field generation after generation to reach the peak. These 2 sects were indeed powerful, but their strength was on the surface. But San Luo Hall was different. No one knew what kind of resources San Luo Hall had because the ghost cultivators were all hiding in the dark. There was a saying in the cultivation world that if a cultivator provoked another first-rank sect, they might still have a chance of survival. However, if they were targeted by the San Luo Temple, then they would have no chance of survival. Song Jue and Wuxia were both cultivators from the military province and from the Myriad Demons Ridge. They were of similar age and cultivation base. Naturally, Song Jue and Wuxia had contacted each other privately. He stood up and spoke so vehemently. On the surface, he seemed to be righteous and selfless, but in fact, he was just trying to encourage the cultivators from the Myriad Devil Ridge. After all, according to the information he received, the defense of Lu Ye's spiritual land was still very strong. Only by reorganizing the forces of the Myriad Devil Ridge would they have a chance to break through the defense of Lu Ye's spiritual land. When the time came, he would lead the Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators to attack. On the surface, he would attract Lu Ye's attention while Wuxia hid in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to strike. After killing Lu Yi, he would split the bounty with Wuxia. The entire plan would be done in secret and the chances of success were extremely high. I'll do it, don't worry. Wuxia's voice drifted over. But I want 60%. Song Jue indifferently said. Give me a reason. I'll bear the infamy. If he really did steal Lu Ye's head under the noses of so many Myriad Demons Ridge cultivators, he would definitely incur their wrath. Moreover, this kind of thing couldn't be concealed at all. When the time came to collect the bounty from the various sects, it would be obvious who killed Lu Yi. The Myriad Demons Ridge cultivators who had their heads stolen might not dare to offend Wuxia, but they could still curse him in private. This was something that was bound to happen. You're just a ghost cultivator who hides his head and shows his tail. Yet you're still afraid of being cursed? Words are like knives to the heart. If too many people curse me, I'll be very sad. I don't care, I want 60%. You'll be stuffed to death. Song Jue snapped, as you wish. 50 to 60% wasn't much of a difference, so Song Jue didn't bother to dwell on this issue. Then hurry up and act, I can't wait any longer. Ing Wuji urged. A moment later, the myriad demons' rich cultivators moved quickly and effectively under Song Jue's command. Hundreds of cultivators moved in groups. The strong body cultivators stood at the front. Behind them were the murderous weapon cultivators, and behind them were the ghost cultivators and dharma cultivators. Under Song Jue's arrangement, the group of cultivators was divided into 9 groups, forming an arrow formation, and majestically moving toward the heavenly spirit land. In the heavenly spirit land, Li Baxian, Feng Yuechan, and Giant Armor stood beside Lu Yi, looking up in the direction of the valley entrance with solemn expressions. With such a lineup from the myriad demons' ridge, their side absolutely couldn't resist. Not to mention that the wolf pack had been driven out. Even if the wolf pack stayed behind, it was impossible to defeat the other side. In the end, they still had to escape back to the 9 regions. But what made Li Baxian feel strange was that his junior brother didn't seem to have the intention to immediately escape back to the 9 regions. He still stood there quietly. He didn't know what Lu Ye's plan was, but he knew that his junior brother was no longer the junior brother, who needed his protection when they first met. After several years of growth, his junior brother had become independent. The myriad demons' rich cultivators pressed toward the heavenly spirit land bit by bit. Song Jue's shout spread in all directions, "Fellow Taoists, be careful. Don't step into the range of the other party's heavenly spirit land. I'll repeat again. There's a forbidden space formation in the heavenly spirit land. Later, we'll attack together and break the protective formation here. Then listen to my command." Song Jue's previous efforts were still very effective. Excluding some ghost cultivators who were hiding in the dark, the cultivators on the surface were very respectful at this moment. After all, they couldn't take the reward for killing Lu Ye alone. Naturally, there was no need to take the risk. It was safer to move together with the group. Of the 9 groups of people, Song Jue personally led one group and flew at the front. When they were about the right distance, Song Jue raised his hand and all the cultivators stopped. He raised his hand and shot out imperial equipment. The imperial equipment's flowing light seemed to penetrate a layer of invisible boundary. As ripples spread, the concealment formation's effect was broken. The situation in the heavenly spirit land was imprinted in everyone's vision. A few wooden houses were scattered, and a spirit spring was very conspicuous. In front of one of the wooden houses, 4 figures stood. Although the figure standing at the back was unusually tall and sturdy, Song Jue's gaze was immediately attracted to Lu Yi, who was standing in front. He frowned slightly, and a trace of surprise flashed across his face. The situation was a little different from what he had imagined. At the same time, the myriad demons' rich cultivators also discovered that the heavenly spirit land in front of them had no protective formation. Or rather, the protective formation had not been activated. The entire heavenly spirit land appeared in their vision without any protection. Moreover, they didn't see any traces of the rumored hundreds of demon wolves. What did this mean? Song Jue's gaze swept across the heavenly spirit land. He didn't see any traces of demon wolves, but that didn't mean there weren't any. Since Lu Ye could arrange a concealment formation to hide the entire heavenly spirit land, hiding a few demon wolves naturally wouldn't be a problem. Song Jue was sure that if they dared to set foot in the heavenly spirit land, those hidden demon wolves would attack from all directions. He had seen through this little trick at a glance. It was like showing off one's slight skill in front of an expert. However, although the situation was unexpected, it made it easier for Ing Wuji to act in secret. Originally, he and Ing Wuji's plan was for him to lead people to break through the protective formation of the heavenly spirit land. Then Ing Wuji would take the opportunity to sneak in and kill Lu Ye. Now that the other party hadn't even activated the protective formation, wouldn't Ing Wuji be able to enter unhindered? Many thoughts flashed through his mind. Song Jue's signature warm smile appeared on his face. He looked at Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan behind Lu Yi and slowly said, "Fellow Taoist Li, fellow Taoist Feng, after so many years, You're still as elegant as ever. When Song Jue was at the Spirit Stream battlefield, he was ranked 3rd on the Spirit Stream list. This was the highest ranking a cultivator could achieve during the reign of the Heavenly Spirit Stream list's 3 malignant tumors. The first was Feng Yuechan and the second was Yan Xing. No matter which one it was, none of the cultivators who came later could contend against them. As experts on the Heavenly Spirit Stream list, Song Jue, Li Baxian, and Feng Yuechan naturally knew each other. Li Baxian ignored him. Since they were in different camps, there was no need to be polite. She only whispered to Lu Yi, Song Jue from the Deep Rainbow Hall is very strong. At the very least, he's on the same level as Xiao Liang. Don't be fooled by his sunny appearance. He's actually very scheming. Lu Yi nodded slightly. He knew how strong Xiao Liang was. For this guy to be on the same level as Xiao Liang, he was obviously very strong. The Deep Rainbow Hall. Lu Yi suddenly remembered. Wasn't that the rank 1 Heavenly Spirit Stream in the War Province? As for Li Baxian's evaluation of Song Jue, it was undoubtedly that this guy was two-faced. However, it didn't matter. Lu Yi didn't need to play any tricks with them. Today's confrontation was an open and above-board scheme. Since Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan ignored him, Song Jue didn't mind. He looked at Lu Yi and said, Fellow Taoist Lu from the Jade Blood Sect, I've heard a lot about you. Songja greets you. Saying so, he politely bowed to Lu Yi. Lu Yi casually cupped his hands. Fellow Taoist Song has come from afar. Why don't you come in for a chat? If word of you standing outside and talking to me were to spread, I'm afraid that cultivators from the Jade Blood Sect would think that we don't know how to treat our guests. Song Jue laughed. Fellow Taoist Lu must be joking. There's no need to go in for a chat. I've long heard that fellow Taoist Lu has extremely high attainments in the Tao of arrays. This Song doesn't want to fall into some kind of array. Although he was smiling on the surface, he coldly snorted in his heart. He was even more certain that there was some kind of earth-shattering array, hidden in Lu Ye's spiritual land. As soon as they stepped in, it would activate and catch them off guard. How could that be? Lu Ye's expression was as calm as water. Everyone who comes is a guest. I can't wait to welcome you. Why would I set up some heavenly net earth fiend array, shocking feather flying heaven array, or Sumera formless sword array to deal with you? Heavenly net earth fiend array, shocking feather flying heaven array, Sumera formless sword array. What kind of array were these? The group of myriad demon-rich cultivators' eyelids twitched. When they looked at the spiritual land again, they only felt that it was full of danger and hidden killing intent. To be continued. Although he knew that with Endless Shadow's ability, he wouldn't be exposed so easily, he was still a little worried. He swept his gaze over the dozen ghostly cultivators and didn't find any trace of Endless Shadow. Only then did he relax a little. Somewhere in the spiritual land, Ing Wuji was hiding in the shadows, slowly approaching Lu Ye's location. He was silent, not retreating even when his dozen or so companions were exposed. As an outstanding ghost cultivator, he naturally had some knowledge of the way of formations, especially the way of breaking formations. This was because there were many times when ghost cultivators needed to sneak into some formations to kill their targets. There was a saying in the cultivation world of the 9 prefectures that a ghost cultivator who did not understand the Tao of arrays was not a qualified ghost cultivator. In the Spirit Stream tier and Cloud River tier, ghost cultivators didn't have high requirements for the Tao of formations. However, as their cultivation level increased, ghost cultivators also had higher requirements for the Tao of formations. This led to a bizarre phenomenon in the cultivation world of the 9 prefectures. Some people appeared to be array masters on the surface, but were actually ghost cultivators who were proficient in concealment and assassination. In terms of attainments in the Tao of formations, Ing Wuji was inferior to Lu Yi, but he was different from those stupid ghost cultivators. He could more or less see some traces of formations, so along the way, he didn't touch any formations at all. He didn't even step into the range of a formation. Is it beautiful? Lu Yi put down the formation flag in his hand. Song Jue took a deep breath and praised. I've long heard that fellow Taoist Lu has extremely high attainments in the Tao of formations. Now that I've seen it, it's really extraordinary. This Song admires you. He had easily forced out the traces of more than a dozen ghostly cultivators. Under such a deterrent, the other ghost cultivators hiding in the dark wouldn't dare to act rashly. So, if he wanted to succeed, he would have to rely on Wuxia. Although the current situation was unexpected, it was what Song Jue wanted to see. He didn't need to do too much. He only needed to attract Lu Ye's attention here and create an opportunity for Wuxia to make a move. Once Wuxia made a move, Lu Ye would die without a doubt and the purpose of this trip would be achieved. Thinking of this, he slowly shook his head. But fellow Taoist Lu, forgive me for saying too much, but this is meaningless. Today, hundreds of fellow Taoists from my myriad Devil Ridge have gathered here. I'm sure fellow Taoist Lu also understands why. Under such circumstances, does fellow Taoist Lu think you still have a chance of survival? It looks like I'm dead for sure. Song Jue said, does fellow Taoist Lu still have some unrealistic fantasies? Naturally, even ants want to live, let alone cultivators like us. It's reasonable that fellow Taoist Lu doesn't want to accept his fate, but is fellow Taoist Lu willing to implicate others because of his own matters? Lu Yi narrowed his eyes slightly. Song Jue continued, no matter how many formations fellow Taoist Lu has laid down in this spiritual land, since the cultivators of my myriad Devil Ridge have come here today, they won't return empty-handed. But if we force it, I'm afraid both of us will suffer losses. The biggest possibility is that we will pay a certain price and your side will be completely wiped out. He raised his eyebrows. Fellow Taoist Lu, how about I make a deal with you? The corners of Lu Ye's mouth suddenly curled up, revealing a trace of a smile. What a coincidence. I also want to make a deal with you. Song Jue was surprised. Oh? What kind of deal does fellow Taoist Lu want to make? Why don't you tell me? Tell me yours first. Song Jue didn't beat around the bush and said bluntly, as I said just now, if there is a conflict, both of us will have to pay the price. How about fellow Taoist Lu just surrender? Are you still asleep? Song Jue said, as long as fellow Taoist Lu is willing to surrender, I can make the decision to let the 3 companions behind you leave this place safely. If fellow Taoist Lu doesn't trust me, I can make a heavenly oath. So that's how it is. Lu Yi understood what he meant, a very sincere proposal, using himself to ensure the safety of Li Baxian and the others. If Lu Yi really didn't have any backup plans, this was indeed a proposal worth considering. Of course, Li Baxian and the others definitely wouldn't agree. Then what does fellow Taoist Lu think? Lu Yi just opened his mouth when he suddenly turned his head to look to the side. The spiritual runes of insight instantly strengthened his eyes. Then, he quickly raised the array flag in his hand and waved it down. He had done this before, which resulted in the explosion of more than 10 ghost cultivators. Now that he suddenly did this again, it was obvious that he had discovered traces of ghost cultivators. But this time, the hidden ghost cultivators were only 10 feet away from his position. This was already an extremely dangerous distance, and the only ghost cultivator who could sneak in to this extent under the previous deterrence was only Wuxia. When Lu Yi looked over, Wuxia's heart was filled with surprise. He instinctively felt that he had not been exposed, but Lu Ye's gaze was fixed on his position, so it was obvious that he had sensed something. How was this possible? 2 months ago, even that true lake stage cultivator didn't sense his approach. How could this Lu Ye detect him? He also didn't trigger any traces of spirit arrays. Or was this guy's soul even stronger than the dead true lake stage cultivator? In that instant, Wuxia reacted, his whole body turning into a black shadow as he rushed towards Lu Yi at an extremely fast speed. Although he wanted to sneak up to Lu Yi and kill him in one strike since he had been exposed, he could only attack head-on. With a distance of 10 feet, it was impossible for a 9th-order cultivator to dodge. Lu Yi didn't dodge, he just waved the array flag in his hand. In the next instant, a curtain of light that covered an area of several meters appeared out of thin air, completely enveloping Wuxia. Wuxia's heart thumped. The moment he saw this light curtain, he realized that something was wrong, because this light curtain gave him the feeling that it was an entrapment array. The next moment, his whole body was wrapped in a fierce aura as he slammed into the light curtain. Unsurprisingly, it was indeed an entrapment array, and even with his full strength as a 9th-order ghost cultivator, he was unable to break through it. A sense of horror flooded his body and mind, and inside the entrapment array, violent and chaotic spirit chi fluctuations surged as a bright burst of fire appeared in Ing Wuji's vision. Hung 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 hung. The explosion array erupted with power, and it wasn't just a single array. Just by looking at the movement, it was obvious there were at least 3 or 4 explosion arrays superimposed. And inside the entrapment array, the power of the explosion array was further amplified. Outside the spirit land, the eyes of many myriad demon-rich cultivators twitched. This scene was painful to watch. Amidst the flames, a muffled groan rang out. The light curtain of the entrapment array only lasted a breath of time before it broke. It wasn't that the entrapment array arranged by Lu Yi wasn't strong enough, but rather that even a powerful ghost cultivator like Ing Wuji couldn't break through it. It was just that the superimposed power of several explosion arrays had exceeded the limits of the entrapment array's light curtain. Almost at the moment the entrapment array's light curtain broke, a black shadow rushed out, but instead of rushing in Lu Ye's direction, it went in the opposite direction. The speed was far faster than before, and the surface of the black shadow was even covered in a thick layer of blood-red light. It was unknown what kind of secret technique it had used. The black shadow flashed and rushed out of returning Heaven Valley in the blink of an eye, disappearing without a trace. From beginning to end, no one saw his true appearance. Only Lu Yi vaguely saw something the moment the other party's figure was exposed. However, the other party was wearing a black cat mask on his face, so Lu Yi couldn't see his appearance. He could only infer from the spirit energy fluctuations that this person was a 9th-order ghost cultivator. In the sky, Song Jue watched this scene speechlessly. Ing Wuji failed. Not only did he fail, but he was also seriously injured. This was truly the biggest joke in the world. To be continued. Chapter 619. Song Jue knew about Ing Wuji's ability. He could kill true Lake Realm ghost cultivators. It was impossible for such a powerful ghost cultivator to fail when dealing with a 5th-order Cloud River Realm cultivator. However, Ing Wuji had escaped with serious injuries, which made Song Jue's originally confident plan disappear in an instant. How did Ing Wuji get exposed? Song Jue really couldn't figure it out, but it was meaningless to think about it now. Ing Wuji had escaped and could no longer be counted on. If he wanted to kill Lu Yi, he could only attack. In fact, Song Jue didn't want to do this because even if he killed Lu Yi, he wouldn't get many benefits in the end. At most, it would increase his fame and prestige. In the future, when the cultivators of Myriad Demon Ridge talked about Lu Yi, they would think that he died in an operation led by Song Jue. What use did fame and prestige have to him? Only practical resources were real benefits. The smile on Song Jue's face disappeared and his expression became serious. Only now did he realize that he seemed to have underestimated Lu Yi. Letting out a soft breath, Song Jue said, "My proposal just now, fellow Taoist Lu hasn't given an answer yet." "I refuse." The resolute answer fell into his ears and Song Jue nodded slightly. As expected, if Lu Yi really agreed to such a thing, he would be crazy. As Song Jue said before, even ants wanted to live, let alone cultivators. Then what is the deal that fellow Taoist Lu mentioned? The corner of Lu Ye's mouth rose slightly, showing a rare smile to a stranger, then raised his hand and waved gently. The space in front of him rippled and an object suddenly appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Song Jue's eyes narrowed and many myriad demon-rich cultivators looked at the object that suddenly appeared in astonishment. It was something that no cultivator was unfamiliar with, something that everyone had encountered countless times. A low voice came from the crowd, "The Heaven's Fate Pillar." There was actually a Heaven's Secret Pillar in a small spiritual land, and from the looks of it, it had been there for a long time, but it had always been concealed by a spirit array so no one had noticed it. It was only now that Lu Yi had taken the initiative to reveal it to everyone. What was there to play with? With the Tianji Pillar, Lu Yi and the others could use the Tianji Pillar to return to the 9 prefectures at any time. Even if there were thousands or tens of thousands of them, what could they do? Unless they could stop those people before they came into contact with the Tianji Pillar. But at this moment, many of the myriad devil-rich cultivators were still outside the range of the Spirit Land formation, so it was impossible for them to do such a thing. In other words, Lu Yi and the others could withdraw at any time. Song Jue finally came to his senses. No wonder Li Baxian and the others had been standing quietly behind Lu Yi without batting an eyelid. It turned out that they had something like this to rely on. At this moment, Song Jue felt that it was extremely laughable when he recalled his previous suggestions and words. His heart was filled with resentment. Previously, he had heard that Lu Ye had managed to summon a divine pillar from the hunting ground and managed to escape from the encirclement. Now, he had actually managed to summon another one from this spiritual land. This was something that was worth 100,000 merit points, while the vast majority of cultivators were still rushing about for tens of thousands of merit points. Lu Ye was able to invite the pillars of heavenly secrets one after another. He couldn't help but feel the same indignation as Xiaoyang and Tansheng. How rich was this dog? What made Song Jue feel even more resentful was that the person who had secretly leaked the information did not mention this matter at all. If he had known that there was a divine pillar in Lu Ye's spiritual land, he would have been more careful. He would have made sure to give Lu Yi a fatal blow before taking action, instead of leading hundreds of people to pressure him. This was Song Jue's misunderstanding. This time, the source of the information about Lu Ye's hiding place came from Tu Guanxiong of the Holy Eve's spiritual land. Tu Guanxiong also did not know that there was a divine pillar here. Back then, Xiaoyang had secretly mentioned this matter to Huoliuan, but Huoliuan relied on his death arena and did not care. In the end, Huoliuan died on the death arena and no one knew about this matter. The only people who knew about this matter were Xiaoyang and Tansheng, but the two had already made up their minds to let the people of the Myriad Devil Ridge force Lu Yi to give up the spiritual land, so they naturally would not publicize it. After seeing the divine pillar, the cultivators of the Myriad Devil Ridge, who were originally confident of victory, lost their fighting spirit and all of them felt that this trip was boring. They were too far away and could not stop Lu Yi and the others before they came into contact with the divine pillar. The ghost cultivators who were originally hiding in the dark might have a chance, but after learning from their mistakes, how would those ghost cultivators dare to casually sneak into the spiritual land now? After the divine pillar was revealed, no one spoke for a full 10 breaths. In the end, it was Song Jue who broke the silence. The deal that fellow Taoist Lu mentioned, is it related to this item? Lu Yi did not directly answer. Instead he said, "There are so many of you gathered here for my life. Perhaps I can give you a chance?" Behind him, Li Baxian frowned and suddenly felt that something was not right. Feng Yuechan also sensed it and turned to look at Li Baxian. Both of them felt that Lu Ye's actions today were a little strange, but they did not disturb him out of trust. However, they did not know what Lu Yi was planning. Only Giant Armor stood there motionless like a mountain, as if he did not care. His thoughts were simple. If there was a fight, he would rush to the front. If there was no fight, he would guard here. What do you mean? Song Jue did not understand. Very simple. Lu Yi looked at him. I will leave here, but you people of the Myriad Devil Ridge cannot break into my spiritual land. Little junior brother. Li Baxian immediately shouted. At this moment he finally understood what Lu Yi was planning. He did not understand Lu Ye's actions. After all, escaping back to the 9 states was the safest choice. Why did little junior brother say such a thing? Lu Yi turned his back to him and said in a low voice, Senior brother, since I have been targeted by the people of the Myriad Devil Ridge, there is no way I can hide. Unless I stay in the 9 states and not enter the Cloudy River battlefield, there will be all kinds of people who want to kill me. Last time there was Xiaoyang and the others who somehow found this place. What about next time? No matter how well I hide, there will still be people who will come looking for me. Rather than hiding in one place, it is better to wander around. This way it will be difficult for others to lock onto my position. As for safety, senior brother does not need to worry too much. There are indeed many people who are stronger than me on the Cloudy River battlefield, but there should not be many who are faster than me. Moreover, I am very familiar with being hunted. Since the Spirit Stream battlefield, those who have tried to kill me have not had a good ending. The last sentence made Li Baxian's heart ache. Thinking back to his little junior brother's various encounters on the Spirit Stream battlefield, he was indeed often in a situation where he was being hunted. I understand what you are saying, but we cannot do this. Little junior brother, let's retreat from the 9 states according to the plan. We can talk about other things in the future. Senior brother, blindly hiding will not solve the problem. Only a strong counterattack will make them afraid. Since they dare to target me, I will kill them. If I hide this time, there will be a next time and a next time. Senior brother does not want to see me hide whenever I encounter trouble, right? Then I will go with you. Lu Yi shook his head. Senior brother, you can stay here and cultivate. Also, help me look after Giant Armor. With Giant Armor's personality, if no one restrains him, who knows what he will do? Moreover, it is more convenient for me to move alone. Li Baxian wanted to say something more, but Feng Yuechan gently tugged on his sleeve and said, Junior brother Lu, if you really do this, you will be in danger at all times. Are you confident? Anything depends on effort. In the air, Song Jue was stunned for a long time before he finally reacted. He asked in astonishment, This is the deal that fellow Taoist Lu mentioned? That's right. Song Jue frowned. He did not know what Lu Yi wanted to do. In the current situation, using the Heaven's Fate Pillar to return to the 9 states was the safest and most correct choice. However, he had proposed such a deal. This was undoubtedly a huge risk. At most, he would only be able to protect a spiritual land, but it would give the Myriad Demon Ridge an opportunity. However, the Myriad Demon Ridge had no reason to refuse such a deal. In fact, they would be happy to see it. Therefore, after pondering for a moment, Song Jue nodded. All right. No matter what the other party wanted to do, there was nothing wrong with agreeing. Do I need to swear a Heaven's Fate oath? Song Jue asked. This deal was too friendly to the Myriad Demon Ridge. It was so friendly that Song Jue would not feel at ease if he did not swear a Heaven's Fate oath. No need, Lu Yi indifferently said. As he spoke, he stepped to the side. Junior brother. Li Baxian still wanted to stop Lu Yi and grabbed his arm. Lu Yi looked at him with a smile. Senior brother, don't worry too much. There's no harm in experiencing more hardships. Their eyes met. Li Baxian saw the determination in Lu Ye's eyes. How could he not know that Lu Yi was right? After dodging this time, there would be a next time and a next time. He could not dodge in such a sorry state every time, but he was still worried. Even though Lu Yi was now able to stand on his own, the person in front of him was still the junior brother who needed his and Wei Yang's protection on the Golden Peak. After a long time, Li Baxian said, Be careful. He also wanted to go with Lu Yi, but if he did, Feng Yuechan would definitely follow. At that time, Giant Armor could not be left behind. The 4 of them moving together was far less convenient than Lu Yi moving alone. I know, Lu Yi replied with a smile. Li Baxian let go of his arm. Lu Yi walked to the side and stood still. He circulated his spirit power and the lines of a large formation quickly lit up under his feet. Song Jue and the group of Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators stared in confusion, not knowing what the formation was. Within the formation, Lu Yi looked up at Song Jue and said softly, Remember my deal with you. If anyone dares to break into my spiritual land, I will return to the Spirit Stream battlefield and destroy their sect's encampment. Song Jue finally understood why Lu Yi did not need him to swear a Heaven's Fate oath. Although the Heaven's Fate oath had an absolute binding effect, Lu Ye's threat was not bad. With this sentence before Lu Yi died, no one would dare to have any ideas about this spiritual land. His cultivation level isn't high, so the teleportation array he set up is limited. At most, it's 200 to 300 miles. Song Jue's expression changed. Are you sure? There's no mistake, the formation cultivator said decisively. Song Jue's eyes flashed with hope again. He immediately ordered, Spread out and look for Lu Yi. If you find him, whistle as a warning. A distance of 200 to 300 kilometers was nothing to cultivators at the Cloud River tier. Thus, even if they temporarily lost sight of him, they might still be able to find him if they spread out. Following his order, the hundreds of cultivators outside the spiritual land immediately scattered in all directions. The current situation was undoubtedly a heaven-sent opportunity for the Myriad Demons Ridge cultivators. All the cultivators here were at least at the 6th order, and all of them were confident that as long as they could find Lu Yi, they would be able to kill him. Previously, under Song Jue's leadership, the bounty for killing Lu Yi had to be divided equally with everyone. Now that they had the opportunity to monopolize the bounty, how could they miss it? Everyone was as excited as if they had been injected with chicken blood. Inside the spirit land, Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan watched the myriad demons' rich cultivators leave with complicated expressions. They no longer paid any attention to them. Feng Yuechan took out the jade slip that controlled the many spirit arrays in the spirit land and revealed a look of realization. So junior brother Lu had this plan all along. The spirit arrays in the spirit land were arranged by Lu Yi. So the jade slip array had naturally been controlled by him. However, just yesterday, Lu Yi found Feng Yuechan and handed the jade slip array to her. He even returned the small umbrella spirit artifact that he had borrowed from her. At that time, Feng Yuechan didn't understand why Lu Yi handed the jade slip array to her, but now that she thought about it, Lu Yi had no intention of returning to the 9 provinces from the very beginning. Thinking about it, he had been cultivating here peacefully, but people had come to him time and time again to provoke him. Under such circumstances, how could he stay? Last time in the hunting ground, he was forced to return to the 9 provinces once. This time, he was unwilling to repeat the same mistake, so he left and prepared to fight with the myriad demons' rich cultivators. Senior brother, since junior brother Lu did this, he must have a plan. Feng Yuechan turned to Li Baxian and comforted him. Li Baxian sighed. In the end, he was useless. If he had a Cloud River Realm 9th Order cultivation, he would have killed as many people as came today. His junior brother wouldn't have to be so aggrieved. He turned to look at giant armor. He thought that giant armor would be restless after Lu Yi left and might even chase after him. Who knew that this guy just stood there quietly, as if nothing had happened? Then, the giant armor turned around and walked into its wooden hut to cultivate. Lu Yi looked for him yesterday and told him to stay here and wait. Just like when Lu Yi told him to wait in place, he ended up waiting for 2 months. Since Lu Yi told him to continue waiting, then he would just wait. There was no need to think too much. He would do whatever Lu Yi told him to do. Cultivate, Li Baxian said. Little junior brother took a huge risk to protect this greatest spirit land. Of course, he had his own considerations, but it was also because he wanted to leave a good cultivation environment for them. Little junior brother had left, so he couldn't help much. The only thing he could do was cultivate hard and improve his cultivation as soon as possible. If he encountered such a situation again one day, he would not be as powerless as he was today. Feng Yuechan activated the jade slip array, activating the protective and concealing spirit arrays in the spirit land. Soon the vast spirit land disappeared. In a cave more than 200 kilometers away from returning sky spirit land, Lu Ye's figure suddenly appeared. Although he was more than 200 kilometers away with the help of the transmission array, this location was not safe. The people of Myriad Demon Ridge would definitely spread out to search for him, so there was only one thing he needed to do right now, and that was to get as far away from returning Sky Valley as possible. It would be best if he left Great Mang Mountain. This was actually not too difficult for him. He had concealment and aura concealment spirit runes. Although he was a weapon cultivator, he also had the means of a ghost cultivator. Although there were many people in Myriad Demon Ridge, it would not be easy to find him. Walking out of the cave, Lu Yi was about to set off, but he was stunned. Not far in front of him, a pale guy with a weak aura and a black cat mask turned his head and looked in his direction. Their eyes met, and Lu Yi raised his hand and pressed the hilt of the mountain coiling saber with a playful expression. Wasn't this the ghost cultivator who had approached 20 meters from him just now? In such a short time, this person had actually come here and coincidentally bumped into him. Enemies were bound to meet on a narrow road. Lu Yi did not know the name of this ghost cultivator or where he came from, but he knew that the other party was a 9th Order cultivator. Under the black cat mask, Ing Wuji showed a pleasantly surprised expression. He did not understand why Lu Yi would appear here, and for a moment, he thought that the other party only looked similar to Lu Yi. However, the amber crouching on Lu Ye's shoulder was undoubtedly an eye-catching mark. It did not make sense for someone to look like Lu Yi and bring along an identical little beast. This guy is Lu Yi. No matter why the other party suddenly appeared here, for Ing Wuji, he was a big fish that had delivered itself to his door. The two sides only exchanged glances for a short moment before they both moved. The two figures stirred up 2 gusts of wind and collided with a loud bang. 2 short blades appeared in Ing Wuji's hands at some point. The short blades were only 3 inches longer than the dagger, and were completely black. They looked similar to the mountain coiling saber. However, the mountain coiling saber's appearance was caused by the woman who called herself Grandmaster Yu when it was being upgraded. The color of the short blades in Ying Wuji's hands was deliberately made. He was a ghost cultivator and needed to be silent when attacking, so the black short blades would undoubtedly reduce the risk of being exposed. One of the short blades blocked Lu Ye's mountain coiling saber while the other went straight for Lu Ye's throat. The difference in cultivation was more than 4 minor realms. Ying Wuji did not understand where Lu Ye got the courage to take the initiative to attack him, but he could almost foresee the scene of his opponent being killed in one blow. If he knew that Huoliao Yuan was thinking the same before he died, he would not be so relaxed. Under the sudden attack of an irresistible force, Ying Wuji's expression immediately changed under the black cat mask. At this moment, he felt that he was not facing a fifth-order cultivator at all, but a master who was on par with him. Ying Wuji could not help but lean back, and the short blade stabbing at Lu Ye's throat also lost its aim. He quickly stabilized his body, but Lu Ye's second blade had already landed. When cultivators fought, especially in this kind of close combat, there were often situations where one careless move could lead to a complete loss. At this moment, Ying Wuji paid the price for his carelessness. When the second strike landed, the force behind it was even heavier than the first strike. Endless Shadow's arm that was holding the dagger felt numb. His body leaned back again, and this time he even took a few steps back. Then came the third, the fourth, ding ding dang 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 sounds rang out, and with each sound Ying Wuji had to take a few steps back. Originally, he was only using one short blade to block, but now he was using 2. His arm went numb, and the web between his thumb and forefinger cracked. Ying Wuji's heart sank to the bottom. If he was at his peak, he would not be in such a sorry state, but when he sneaked into the spirit land, he was injured by several explosion arrays and was forced to use a secret technique to escape. Now, he could not even say that he was an arrow at the end of its flight. He could not even display half of his peak strength. But even if he only had half of his strength, it should be more than enough to deal with a fifth-order cultivator. But, was this the strength of a fifth-order cultivator? Oi! Chapter 621. In a hurry, after exchanging 5 blows, Ying Wuji's entire body was already cold. At this moment his body leaned back uncontrollably, leaving his chest wide open. In his field of vision, a long saber stabbed straight at him. He couldn't dodge it. He couldn't dodge it. The injuries he had suffered in Hutian Valley, and the price he had to pay for activating the secret technique had slowed his reaction speed a lot, so he had no power to resist this blow. When they first exchanged blows, Ying Wuji was shocked by the strength Lu Ye had displayed and felt that he could fight evenly with him. But in just 2 short breaths, what he thought was an even match had turned into a complete one-sided crush. He madly urged his protective spirit chi and watched helplessly as the long saber stabbed into his chest. A flash of light erupted from the pitch-black saber, and a complex and mysterious pattern flashed across it. Double-edged spirit inscriptions. His already disordered spiritual energy was unable to provide him with much protection in a hurry. Under this strike, he was able to his protective spirit chi was directly broken, and the mountain saber stabbed into Ying Wuji's chest. Lu Ye raised his eyebrows. The moment the saber stabbed into the other party's body, he felt that there seemed to be something blocking the saber's advance on his chest, and there was even a light tinkling sound. This black cat-faced ghost cultivator was wearing a treasure similar to a heart-protecting mirror. Ooh! Using the force of the impact, Ying Wuji's figure was forced back, and he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. This was not because he was injured by Lu Ye but because he was already injured. Quickly pulling back a few feet, Ying Wuji no longer had any thoughts about Lu Ye and turned around. He flew into the air. Lu Ye had already caught up, but after taking a step, he saw Ying Wuji's body wrapped in a layer of blood-red mist, as if his blood was boiling and evaporating. He directly turned into a red light and flew away. His speed was so fast that even Lu Ye couldn't catch up with him. This secret technique again. When he was in Hutian Valley, this ghost cultivator had used this secret technique to escape, and he had used it again in such a short time. No matter what this secret technique was, just from the signs when it was activated, It was clear that it was not a simple secret technique. Once it was activated, there would be a great backlash. Lu Yi did not chase after this person. Although he felt that if he did, there was a high chance that he could kill this person, he was now the one being hunted. He had just been transported out of the Return to Heaven Spirit Land, so what he needed to do now was to quickly hide. Currently, there were only two choices in front of Lu Yi. One was to go deep into the Taimong Mountains, and the other was to leave the Taimong Mountains. The hundreds of myriad demons rich cultivators had spread out to search for him, so there was no need for them to hide. If they joined forces, as long as they could find Lu Ye's whereabouts, taking him down would be as easy as crushing a conch. At this moment, the few of them were rushing nearby. They did not fly high, and as they flew, they seemed to be searching for something. "Senior brother, over there." Suddenly, an 8th Order cultivator pointed somewhere below. Song Jue looked over and immediately led the others to descend. Not far in front of them, a man wearing a black cat mask was leaning against a big rock, his head drooping motionless. His clothes were stained red with blood, as if he had been soaked in it. Strangely, there were no particularly obvious external injuries on his body. This person was naturally Ying Wuji, but unlike when he appeared in the Spirit Land and when he appeared in front of Lu Yi just now, the current Ying Wuji seemed to have lost a lot of weight. In such a short period of time, he had used his secret technique to escape twice. This was the price he had to pay. And these so-called secret techniques were not easily used. If Ying Wuji's foundation was not strong enough, he might have really died. "Is he dead?" A 7th Order female cultivator asked softly. Anyone who saw Ying Wuji like this would think he was dead. His drooping head suddenly lifted and his hands moved as Ying Wuji struggled to speak. "Don't speak nonsense, cough cough." Ying Wuji coughed violently and blood flowed out from the corners of his mouth. Song Jue frowned. "How did you end up like this?" Even if Ying Wuji had been injured by the spirit array arranged by Lu Yi in the Spirit Land, even if he had used his secret technique, he should not have been so weak. He finally understood why Ying Wuji had suddenly sent him a message and called him over. In this state, if no one came to protect him, any random demonic beast would be able to kill Ying Wuji without a doubt. Ying Wuji was calling for help. "Lu Yi!" Ying Wuji called out. "What?" Song Jue was startled and suddenly reacted. "You met Lu Yi? Where is he?" Ying Wuji raised his hand with great effort and pointed in a direction, 40 miles away. After he finished speaking, his raised hand fell to the ground. He really didn't have any strength left. With this kind of injury, he wouldn't be able to recover without half a month to a month of rest. To a powerful ghost cultivator like him, who had even killed a true lake stage cultivator, his current state was simply too unsightly. It filled his heart with humiliation. Song Jue immediately flew up and hurriedly rushed in the direction Ying Wuji had pointed while calling out, "Junior brother Lu, stay here and take care of him." Ying Wuji's weak voice rang out in his ear. "Don't be careless, he's very strong." Song Jue pretended not to hear. Lu Yi was just a 5th Order, how could he be stronger than him? The most important thing now was to find his whereabouts. Song Jue and the others quickly left, leaving behind a bearded man. It was junior brother Lu. After all, Ying Wuji was a cultivator from San Luo Temple, a sect from the War Province. San Luo Temple and Abyss Rainbow Temple had always been close, so Song Jue naturally would not ignore the other party's life or death. Junior brother Lu was a 7th Order cultivator, so it would not be a problem for him to take care of the injured Ying Wuji. Following the direction Ying Wuji had pointed out, Song Jue led his junior brothers and junior sisters all the way and soon arrived at the cave where Lu Yi and Song Jue had fought. After carefully examining it, they confirmed that there were indeed traces of a fight here, but there were not many, so it was obvious that the fight had not been going on for long. After exploring the cave again, they found a hidden spirit array. Even if they knew nothing about spirit arrays, they were certain that this was a transmission array left behind by Lu Yi. The other party had used this transmission array to directly teleport here from returning Heaven Valley. There were not many useful clues. Although they were certain that Ying Wuji had met Lu Yi here, it was difficult to determine where he was now. With no other choice, they could only continue to search. Oh! Under the leadership of Song Jue from Abyss Rainbow Temple, Hundreds of cultivators from Myriad Demon Ridge had forcibly suppressed Liu Ye's spirit land. There was actually a pillar of heaven's secrets in the spirit land. Originally, Liu Yi had the opportunity to use the pillar of heaven's secrets to directly return to the 9 regions. But he made a surprising decision. He left his spirit land through the transmission array, and declared that if anyone dared to break into his spirit land, he would return to the spirit stream battlefield and destroy the other party's sex station. No one knew why Liu Yi would make such an irrational move, but this undoubtedly gave the cultivators of Myriad Demon Ridge great hope. Liu Yi was currently hiding somewhere in the Taimeng Mountains. Whoever could find him would have a chance of obtaining the huge reward. Through the continuous spread of the battlefield imprints of the cultivators, countless cultivators of Myriad Demon Ridge received this news in just a short day. Especially those cultivators of Myriad Demon Ridge, who were in the Taimeng Mountains and had not been able to reach Returning Heaven Valley. Their cultivation and strength were insufficient, so they could not go deeper into the Taimeng Mountains. They had thought that this trip would be in vain, but the situation had taken a turn for the worse and brought them hope. Suddenly, they were full of energy and began to search around. However, for the entire day, none of the tens of millions of Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators in the Taimeng Mountains had found a trace of Liu Yi. No one knew where he was hiding. Chapter 622. Night fell and darkness enveloped the sky. A new moon rose and the stars twinkled in the sky. In a mountain wilderness about 500 kilometers away from Returning Heaven Valley, several cultivators were besieging a blue-eyed porcupine. Even though the Taimeng Mountains were filled with danger, there were many fortuitous encounters hidden within it. There were rare demon beasts, rare medicinal herbs, and many minerals that were difficult to find outside. All of these fortuitous encounters were extremely attractive to cultivators. Cultivators were a group of people who liked to pursue profits. Because cultivation required a lot of resources, the monthly salary that each sect gave to their disciples was not enough to meet the needs of the cultivators. This was the case for both large and small sections. It was not that the sects were stingy, but they used this method to encourage their disciples to obtain more cultivation resources through their own means. At the same time, they used this method to sharpen their disciples. Otherwise, if one only knew how to cultivate and did not know how to fight, no matter how high one's cultivation was, it would only be an empty shell. Only Liu Yi could take cultivation resources from his sect's treasury without any restrictions. The large amount of resources in the sect's treasury were all plundered by him from Myriad Demon's Ridge and belonged to him. Although Shui Yuan was nominally in charge of the distribution of the sect's resources, how could she make things difficult for him over such a trivial matter? Before Liu Yi, although the Blue Blood sect could not be said to be poor, it did not have many resources. Shui Yuan's cultivation was even affected. Otherwise, with her aptitude, she could have broken through to the Spirit Sea realm long ago. Why would she have delayed until last year? Now, the Blue Blood sect had accumulated an incalculable amount of resources in the sect's treasury due to Liu Ye's various actions. In the Great Mang Mountains, blue-eyed porcupines were a very common monster beast. They could be found everywhere in the Great Mang Mountains. Although they were common, they were very valuable monster beasts. Their skin and flesh were extremely tender, and had a certain effect on body tempering. If eaten over a long period of time, it could improve one's vitality. Not to mention, monster generals had monster cores in their bodies. The stronger the blue-eyed porcupine, the more valuable it was. Several Myriad Demons Ridge cultivators were dealing with this blue-eyed porcupine. Judging from its monster chi fluctuations, it was a monster general comparable to an 8th Order Cloud River Realm cultivator. Several cultivators at the 6th or 7th Order cooperated with each other, with the strong body cultivator attracting the blue-eyed porcupine's attention, while the remaining armament cultivators, Dharma cultivators, and ghost cultivators waited for an opportunity to attack. The situation was under their control. The battle had been going on for quite some time. The blue-eyed porcupine's body was covered in wounds, and its body was dyed red with blood. Its throat constantly emitted low growls, but it was still a trapped beast. Every time it tried to break out of the encirclement and escape, it would be beaten back by a violent attack. If nothing unexpected happened, it wouldn't take long for them to take down this demonic beast. Their search for Lu Yi was fruitless. Since they encountered a monster beast with decent value, they decided to take it down. This kind of thing didn't just happen to these myriad devil-rich cultivators. Looking at the current Taimeng Mountains, similar scenes could be seen everywhere. The few of them were concentrating on dealing with the demonic beasts in front of them. No one would have thought that in the darkness, a figure was quietly approaching them. It wasn't until a strange sound was heard, accompanied by a short scream, that they were shocked. Turning their heads to look, they saw the armament cultivator in the group kneeling on the ground with his hand covering his chest. Behind the armament cultivator, a figure had appeared out of nowhere and was pulling out a long saber from the armament cultivator's body. When everyone turned their heads, that person pounced towards the spell cultivator at the side at lightning speed. His speed was extremely fast. The Dharma cultivator was in the middle of casting a spell. Seeing this scene, he panicked and hurriedly stopped casting his spell. His figure quickly retreated while madly urging his body, protecting spirit energy. In the blink of an eye, a figure appeared in front of the Dharma cultivator. The strong sense of oppression made it difficult for the Dharma cultivator to breathe. He instinctively urged his spirit energy, and at the same time a huge repulsive force swept out in all directions. However, the figure that suddenly appeared in front of him suddenly disappeared. At the same time, he caught a glimpse of a flash of saber light from the side. The Dharma cultivator's body protecting spirit energy only lasted for less than 2 breaths before it completely shattered. The last thing he felt was a trace of insignificant pain spreading through his body. But soon the pain became extremely clear and intense, causing him to scream. The bright saber light flashed past, and the scream came to an abrupt end. "Louis!" A cry of alarm rang out. It was the ghost cultivator who shouted. His heart was filled with horror. In just 2 breaths of time, 2 of the team of 4 had died. His heart was filled with grief and confusion. Wasn't Lu Yi a armament cultivator? But looking at the method he used just now, it was clearly something only a ghost cultivator could use. Did he also cultivate a ghost cultivator sect? He had never heard of such a thing. Despite his surprise and horror, he still instinctively rushed towards Lu Yi to kill him. After all, he was a 7th-order cultivator, while Lu Yi was only a 5th-order cultivator. The other party was able to kill his companions by relying on a sneak attack. Now that his figure had been exposed, there was no reason for him to miss it. As long as he killed Lu Yi, how could a trivial blue-eye porcupine compare to the bounty he would receive? It would be countless blue-eye porcupines. He seemed to be able to see the scene of him soaring in the future with a huge bounty on his head. However, after 3 breaths of time, the excitement in his heart was completely replaced by deep horror. As the spirit artifacts collided, sparks flew everywhere. The 7th-order ghost cultivator stumbled back with a look of disbelief on his face. In a head-on confrontation, he was completely suppressed by a 5th-order armament cultivator. It wasn't just suppression, it was simply crushing. The strength, speed, and adaptability of the other party's attacks far exceeded his own. After 5 breaths of time, the ghost cultivator's arms were completely numb, and his spirit chi was extremely scattered from the collision. After another 2 breaths, a head flew up and a headless corpse fell to the ground. Louis immediately turned around and charged towards the body cultivator. The body cultivator's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. He was not only heartbroken over the death of his companions, but also horrified by the powerful strength displayed by Lu Yi. A 5th-order cultivator had killed 3 of his companions in a short period of time. If it hadn't happened right under his nose, he wouldn't have believed it. When Lu Yi killed the 2nd spirit cultivator, the body cultivator wanted to help, but the injured blue-eyed porcupine seemed to have gone crazy. It charged at him again and again, and the body cultivator couldn't escape at all. A monster general comparable to an 8th-order Cloud River Realm cultivator could be easily defeated by the 4 of them working together. But if he was alone, he could barely contend against it. If he left it alone, the body cultivator was sure that the blue-eyed porcupine's fangs would make a few holes in his body. Seeing his 3rd ghost cultivator companion die under Lu Yi's blade, the body cultivator realized that he was in big trouble this time. When Lu Yi joined the attack, the 7th-order body cultivator's death was already destined. The blue-eyed porcupine seemed to know that Lu Yi wasn't an enemy. Its scarlet eyes only focused on the body cultivator, ignoring Lu Yi. The moment his spirit chi protection collapsed, the body cultivator let the blue-eyed porcupine pierce 2 holes in his waist and abdomen. The spirit artifact shield in his hand blocked Lu Yi's slash. Then he pushed his spirit chi and let out a long howl. Song Jue had said before that if he found any trace of Lu Yi, he would let out a long howl to warn him. At the last moment of his life, he finally remembered this. Of course, he wouldn't have a good end, but he definitely wouldn't let Lu Yi have it easy either. The howl stopped when the mountain coiling saber slashed down. Lu Yi didn't even have time to collect his spoils of war. He plunged into the night and quickly disappeared. The blue-eyed porcupine, covered in blood, also rushed in another direction and fled. A short while later, a team rushed over after hearing the howl. All they saw were 4 corpses lying on the ground. The battlefield was a mess, and the thick smell of blood assailed their nostrils. In another location, 3 cultivators had just experienced a battle of hunting demonic beasts, and they were meditating and adjusting their breathing. Among the 3, one of them cultivated the Tao of Spirit arrays as well. Before meditating, he had set up a few simple warning arrays nearby. If a monster beast approached, the array would warn them. This was also the reason why the 3 of them dared to meditate together with peace of mind. However, when Lu Yi lurked here, those simple warning arrays didn't work at all. He was a formation cultivator himself, so his attainments in the Tao of Spirit arrays were much higher than the magic cultivators. Even if he didn't activate his clear vision spirit patterns, he could still see some traces of array formations with his naked eye. In his field of vision, the other party's array formations weren't refined at all. Approaching the target, suddenly launching an attack, the battle erupting abruptly and ending quickly. A dozen breaths later, when Lu Yi collected his spoils of war and left, only 3 corpses remained on the ground. A strange floral fragrance wafted through the air. Some cultivators followed the fragrance and found this place. They immediately saw a purple flower growing between the cracks of the rocks. The peanut had 5 petals, and each petal had some strange patterns. At first glance, it looked as if there was an open eye growing on it. Although the cultivator attracted by the flower wasn't proficient in medicinal theory, as a qualified cultivator, he still had the eyesight to distinguish some heavenly treasures. He could tell at a glance that this purple flower was a rare medicinal herb. After saying a few words to his companion, he excitedly took out his tools to collect the purple flower. But the moment he stretched out his hand, a pitch-black saber suddenly attacked from the side. The cultivator didn't even have time to react before the saber pierced through his waist and into his heart. The saber was pulled out, bringing with it a spray of blood. His companion instinctively counterattacked in a scream, but what greeted him was a storm of saber lights. A figure flashed through the air, the spirit energy fluctuations around him revealing that he was an 8th order cultivator. Even though it was already late, he didn't give up on searching for Lu Ye's whereabouts. He knew that the longer he waited, the more difficult it would be to find Lu Yi. At the same time, he had to guard against the other experts of the Myriad Demon Ridge. His powerful 8th order cultivation was the source of his confidence in acting alone. Some people had invited him to accompany them before, but he had rejected them all. How could sharing the benefits with others compare to taking the bounty alone? To be continued. No matter what, since Yi had embarked on the path of Dharma cultivation and had outstanding talent, it was no longer appropriate for her to switch to another sect. She could only wait until she was stronger in the future to consider cultivating in the ghostly cultivation sect. Even though she had never come into contact with the Tao of ghost cultivators, as a spirit body, she was born with some advantages that ghost cultivators couldn't reach. At this moment, she silently appeared behind the enemy, and the enemy did not notice at all. It wasn't until Yi summoned the 9-spirit array diagram that the 8th order weapon cultivator was startled. However, before he could investigate what kind of danger was behind him, his vision blurred and he suddenly appeared in a stone forest. Find a place to hide, Lu Yi ordered before rushing into the 9-spirit array diagram. Time passed by, and after the time it would take to drink a cup of tea, He shook the 9-spirit array diagram and Lu Ye's figure appeared. There were a few more wounds on his body, but they weren't serious, just flesh wounds. At his feet was the corpse of the 8th Order weapon cultivator. Comparatively speaking, this person had many injuries on his body. His clothes were almost dyed red with blood. Even though he had lost all vitality, his eyes were still wide open, as if he had died with a grievance. He had indeed died with his eyes wide open. Against Lu Yi, the two were evenly matched at first, but since they were inside the 9-spirit array diagram, Yi could naturally interfere slightly. With her secret cooperation, how could this 8th Order weapon cultivator be Lu Ye's opponent? In the end, he was hacked to death by Lu Yi. "Let's go," Lu Yi called out and picked a direction at random. It was almost dawn, and after hunting for an entire night, he had consumed a lot of energy and needed to rest. Half an hour later, in a concealment array, Lu Yi sat cross-legged and swallowed a spirit pill to restore himself. When he returned from Fox Immortal Valley, Lu Yi felt that he had the ability to fight against an 8th Order cultivator, but he hadn't had the chance to verify it until just now, when he finally found a lone 8th Order weapon cultivator. After fighting with each other, he confirmed his conjecture. Under normal conditions, he did have the ability to fight against an 8th Order cultivator. Even without Yi's secret help, Lu Yi was confident he could kill the other party. This undoubtedly meant that he now had the ability to kill enemies 3 minor realms above him. Before, he could only fight against enemies 2 minor realms above him at most. The opportunity he obtained in Fox Immortal Valley played a huge part in this change. The baptism bestowed by Heaven's secret sect allowed him, Li Baxian, and the others to greatly increase their strength, and this was only under normal conditions. If he could activate his beast transformation secret technique, his strength would increase greatly. Perhaps he could even fight against a 9th Order cultivator? Lu Yi couldn't be sure about this. Although he had killed a 9th Order cultivator in a one-on-one fight, he had relied on his talent tree to isolate the flames in the battle with Huiliao Yuan. It could be said that he had exhausted Huiliao Yuan to death. That was a special case, so he couldn't be sure. However, the activation of the beast transformation secret technique required a long time of preparation and resonance. So far, Lu Yi had only activated it once. In any case, the current him could be said to be a member of the Cloud River realm. He was no longer a weakling who could be bullied by anyone when he first entered the Cloud River battlefield. This was also why he dared to leave the Spirit Land. Anyone who dared to underestimate him because of his cultivation would inevitably pay a heavy price. None of the myriad demon-rich cultivators expected Lu Ye's revenge to come so quickly. From the perspective of the cultivators of the myriad Devil Ridge, he had left the spiritual land and was hiding in the Taimang Mountains. Right now he must be hiding here and there like a stray dog. What they needed to do now was to constantly search for him, find him, and then kill him. However, in just one night 4 or 5 teams had already disappeared without a trace. The myriad demon-rich cultivators moved in groups of 3 to 5, which greatly facilitated Lu Ye's hunting operations. When he was in the Spirit Stream realm, he had been hunted down many times like this. However, the current him was no longer a Spirit Stream realm cultivator. When he was in the Spirit Stream realm, he hadn't mastered the concealment and aura concealment spirit inscriptions. It was difficult for him to hide his whereabouts under the large-scale search of the enemy. He could only constantly escape and change his position. Now it was different. With the support of the concealment and aura concealment spirit inscriptions, he could use the means of a ghost cultivator as a weapon cultivator. The myriad demon-rich cultivators thought he was prey, but in fact, in his opinion, the myriad demon-rich cultivators were his prey. In one night, the disappearance of 4 or 5 teams didn't attract too much attention. These myriad devil-rich cultivators were mostly with their own sect members or friends. They rarely communicated with others, so even if they disappeared, most people wouldn't know. It was the same for 1 night, 2 nights, and 3 nights. The myriad demon ridge finally realized that something was wrong. This was especially true for Song Jue. When he was rousing the cultivators of the myriad demon ridge at the entrance of Heaven Returning Valley, many of them exchanged battle marks with him. Every night, a batch of battle marks would disappear. This was clearly not the doing of a monster beast, but someone who had done it. In Taimang Mountain, other than a large number of myriad demon-rich cultivators, There was only Lu Yi. Was that guy so powerful? Song Jue did not quite understand. He recalled Ng Wuji's last words, telling him to be careful of Lu Ye because the other party was very strong. Song Jue suddenly realized that he seemed to have underestimated Lu Ye all this time. He didn't even know how deep Lu Ye's foundation was. If the disappearance of these myriad Devil Ridge cultivators was caused by Lu Ye, then this person's strength was definitely stronger than he had expected. What annoyed him even more was that he had not been able to find Lu Ye's whereabouts for the past few days. Ever since this guy left Return Sky Valley through the teleportation array, it was as if he had completely evaporated. However, Song Jue knew that Lu Yi was still in Taimang Mountain. If those myriad Demon Ridge cultivators disappeared because of him, then he would definitely continue to act like this. The fourth night came. Song Jue was prepared this time. He deliberately contacted the myriad Demon Ridge cultivators in advance and asked for their location before waiting quietly. When one of the battlefield brands suddenly disappeared, Song Jue immediately soared into the air and rushed in a certain direction. The others followed closely behind him. However, by the time he arrived with his junior brothers and junior sisters, it was already too late. Several corpses were lying on the ground with blood splattered all over. He carefully examined them and found that the fatal wounds on the bodies of the dead were all saber wounds. Judging from the traces left at the scene, the battle did not last long. Such a four-person team, all of them 6th or 7th order cultivators, was already a good combination. How could Lu Ye, a 5th order cultivator, kill so many people in such a short time? Or did he have some helpers around him? But Lu Ye left Return Sky Valley alone. How could he have any helpers around him? There were too many things that Song Jue could not find out. The only thing he knew was that Lu Yi was indeed stronger than he thought. Just as Song Jue was pondering, a stream of light passed by not far away. As if discovering them, the stream of light changed direction and landed in front of them, revealing a person's figure. The person nodded slightly to Song Jue. Brother Song. Brother Zizai. The person who came was called Ning Zizai, also a 9th order cultivator from a 2nd grade sect in Yu Province. They had met before in Return Sky Valley and had also dealt with Song Jue before, so they were naturally familiar with each other. Chapter 624. Brother Song, is this Lu Ye's doing? Ning Zizai looked at the corpses on the ground. Song Jue said, I just arrived but it looks like it. Ning Zizai asked, do you mind if I take a look? What was there to mind? It was just a few corpses. Song Jue said, Brother Zizai, help yourself. Ning Zizai squatted down and carefully examined the corpses for a while. He even turned the corpses over and over again. Seeing this, the people behind Song Jue frowned, wondering if this guy had some special fetish. After a long while, Ning Zizai stood up with a thoughtful look on his face. Brother Zizai, what did you find? Song Jue asked. Ning Zizai said, nothing much, but judging from the injuries, they are no different from the people who died in the past few days. I can be sure that it was done by the same person. Brother Zizai, have you been examining the corpses for the past few days? It's not on purpose. I just happened to come across them, so I took a look. He turned to look at Song Jue. Brother Song, can you be sure that this was done by Lu Ye? Song Jue thought. Who would you ask me? However, he couldn't say that in front of his junior brothers and junior sisters, so he said, Lu Ye uses a saber, and these people died from saber wounds. It's basically him. I remember that Lu Ye is a weapon cultivator. Ning Zizai was full of doubts, but, according to my observation, one of the people who died in each group must have died from a sneak attack from behind. This is a bit like a ghost cultivator's method, so I suspect that Lu Ye has some helpers around him. Otherwise, how could he have killed so many people on his own? And that helper must be a powerful ghost cultivator. This happened to coincide with Song Jue's previous doubts. For a moment, both of them felt that Lu Ye must have some helpers around him. In fact, Lu Ye did have helpers around him, but it wasn't like the two of them thought. His helpers were only Hu Po and Yi. Song Jue and Ning Zizai chatted casually for a while more before they went their separate ways. They agreed to exchange information if they found anything. As for whether they would exchange information or not, only each of them knew. For 9th order cultivators like them, if they really found Lu Ye, they would definitely kill him immediately. Why would they exchange information with others? After the 5th night, the Myriad Demon Ridge side lost another 2 teams. At the same time, Lu Yi also discovered a problem. There were fewer and fewer targets for him to attack. Lu Yi had killed a lone 8th Order cultivator before, so if there were other lone 8th Order cultivators, with the 9 spirit array in Yi's hands and her secret help, Lu Yi could easily kill them. However, if this 8th Order cultivator had a companion, Lu Yi could only temporarily avoid them. If he could not guarantee that he could escape unscathed, he would definitely not act rashly. Only when he was sure that he had the ability to kill all the enemies in his sight would he launch a sneak attack from the shadows. Currently, the various teams scattered in the depths of Taimang Mountains were led by 8th Order, and even 9th Order masters, so Lu Yi naturally couldn't touch such a group. As a result, after a few nights of hunting, there were fewer and fewer targets for him to choose from. Moreover, as the number of Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators increased, the surviving Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators became even more vigilant and united. In the first few nights, Lu Yi didn't encounter many teams. The smallest had 2 people, and the largest had 3 or 4 people. He didn't encounter any teams of 5 people. There were even some teams that thought they were acting alone. However, many of the teams he encountered last night had merged into groups of 2 or 3, and the number of people had expanded to 7 to a dozen. Even if there was no 8th Order or 9th Order cultivator in such a team, Lu Yi didn't dare to provoke them. With his current strength, it wasn't too risky to deal with teams with less than 5 people and no 8th Order cultivators, but it was impossible to go beyond this range. Therefore, after a night of hunting, only 2 teams of Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators died at his hands, a total of 7 people. Compared to the number of people on the first day, it could be said that the disparity was huge. After a few days of hunting, Lu Yi could finally vent the frustration in his heart. Although he wanted to kill Song Jue and the others, he knew that it was unrealistic. It was time to leave Taimang Mountains. Now that his cultivation wasn't enough, he couldn't always hide here with the Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators. A cultivator's cultivation was still mainly focused on improving their cultivation. Although the location of returning spirit land had been exposed, he had left many spirit arrays and Heaven's Fate pillars in the spirit land. If they encountered any unstoppable danger, 4th Senior Brother and the others could use the Heaven's Fate pillars to escape back to the 9 states. Their safety was very guaranteed. Moreover, with the words he left behind before leaving returning spirit land, before he died, which Myriad Devil Ridge cultivator would dare to attack returning spirit land? If they attacked today, Lu Yi would return to the Spirit Stream battlefield tomorrow and destroy their sex station. It wasn't that he hadn't done this before. It was precisely because he had done it once that he had such a strong deterrent. The sky was about to brighten. Lu Yi raised his hand and tapped on the battlefield mark, sending a message to Li Baxian, Senior Brother. I'm preparing to leave Taimang Mountains. He had also sent messages to Li Baxian these days, but they didn't talk too much, just simply reporting that he was safe. Chapter 625. Walking into the cave and going deeper, Lu Yi gradually noticed that something wasn't quite right. Originally, he thought that this was just a hidden cave that could be used to rest. However, this cave was too deep. Lu Yi pondered for a moment and walked to the side to observe for a while. The rock walls on both sides of the passage had traces of mining, and judging from these traces, it was obvious that they had been here for quite some time. How was this a cave? This was clearly a mine. Lu Yi had been a slave miner in Evil Moon Valley and had been in and out of the mine for many years, so whether this was a mine or not couldn't be hidden from his eyes. Perhaps many years ago, this place contained some valuable minerals, which were then mined away by cultivators. Thus, the mining tunnels left behind by the mining of minerals were left behind. There were many such places in the Cloud River battlefield and even the Spirit Stream battlefield, so it wasn't unusual. Lu Yi didn't have any thoughts about this place. This mine had existed for a long time, and even if there were any valuable minerals in the past, they would have been mined clean long ago, so how could he have a chance? Continuing to go deeper, a few kilometers later, a huge mine suddenly appeared in front of him. This was a very spacious space. a little larger than the space occupied by the heavenly spirit land. Calculating the location, this place was already deep inside the mountain. The minerals that once contained here must be of great value, otherwise, it wouldn't have been emptied out like this. The mine was pitch black, but it didn't prevent Lu Yi from looking around. Looking around the hollowed-out mine, a vague idea suddenly emerged in his mind, and as his thoughts churned, this idea became clearer and clearer. Lu Yi, are we going to rest here tonight? Yi had already walked around the mine and didn't find anything dangerous, but there were some traces left behind by people. It seemed that someone had discovered this place before and rested here. Although the entrance to this mine was hidden, someone could still find it. No. Lu Yi shook his head. Let's go and give Myriad Demon Ridge a big gift. Originally, Lu Yi had been hunting for several nights in the depths of Taimeng Mountain, killing a lot of Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators, some of whom were even 8th Order cultivators. But now, Lu Yi didn't have any other ideas, mainly because he wasn't strong enough. Even if he wanted to, it was useless. So he decided to leave Taimeng Mountain. But after seeing this mine, a plan uncontrollably emerged in his mind. If this plan could be implemented, it would definitely be able to deal a heavy blow to those Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators who had been searching for him. This was especially true for a 9th Order cultivator like Song Jue. How can the joy of working hard to cultivate compare to trying to please women? Chapter 626. Senior Brother Qin, the leader of the 5-man team, looked around and said, I remember there was an abandoned mine nearby. Strange, why can't I find it? Senior Marshal's sister Hu said, Did you remember wrongly? Senior Marshal Brother Qin said, No, when your Senior Marshal Brother Xia was still in the Cloudy River battlefield, he brought me here once. I remember it clearly, it was nearby. The Senior Marshal Brother Xia he mentioned had some impression of him. His cultivation was much higher than theirs. He had already reached the True Lake stage and left the Cloudy River battlefield. As Senior Marshal Brother Qin spoke, he led the others down and looked around in confusion. Finally, his gaze landed on a spot. He walked forward and pushed aside the tall grass. Then he gently pressed his hand against the stone wall in front of him. A strange scene appeared. His hand was clearly pressed against the stone wall, but it seemed to have pressed against empty space. When the stone wall rippled, half of his hand was swallowed up. It's really here. This is a concealment array? Senior Marshal's sister Hu also saw some clues. In such a place there was actually a concealment array. This undoubtedly meant that there was something wrong. Moreover, this was the last place Lu Ye appeared. An uncontrollable thought suddenly popped up in the minds of the two. The two looked at each other and were shocked. Lu Ye was inside. The concealment array at the entrance of the cave was set up by Lu Ye. Immediately excited, Senior Marshal's sister Hu whispered, Senior Marshal Brother Qin, what do we do? Although they had been looking for Lu Ye, there were so many cultivators looking for Lu Ye. They didn't think that they could be faster than the others. But luck was hard to explain. They were actually the first to find Lu Ye. Although they didn't see Lu Ye, there was a concealment array at the entrance of the mine. Anyone could see some clues. Lu Ye was now seriously injured and urgently needed to find a hidden and safe place to recuperate. They didn't know how he found this place, hid in it, and then set up a concealment array to block the entrance of the mine. If Senior Marshal Brother Qin hadn't been here before and had some impression of this mine, he wouldn't have found it. Suppressing the excitement in his heart, Senior Marshal Brother Qin waved his hand and said, Let's go. With that, he took the lead and walked towards the stone wall in front of him. As the ripples spread, he disappeared. Senior Marshal's sister Hu followed closely behind, and the other three also entered. After entering the mine, the light inside was dim. Under Senior Marshal Brother Qin's lead, they carefully walked forward. After walking less than 300 feet, Senior Marshal Brother Qin, who was at the back of the group's group, and his heart beat violently as if there was great danger ahead. He hurriedly called out, Marshal Brother Qin. Song Jue and the others didn't come too late. When they received the news, they immediately rushed over, disregarding the consumption of their spirit qi. But when they arrived, they saw that there were cultivators everywhere. There were at least 800 cultivators gathered here, if not 1,000, and the number was still increasing. What made him feel strange was that although there were many cultivators gathered here, they didn't seem to be moving. They were just waiting. There was a faint smell of blood, as if someone was injured. Song Jue saw a few familiar faces and flew straight in the direction of one of them. He landed in front of that person and cupped his fists. Brother Zizai. This person was Ning Zizai, who had met Song Jue in the depths of Great Mang Mountain before. Brother Song is also here. Ning Zizai returned the greeting. What's the situation now? Song Jue asked. Ning Zizai said, we can basically confirm that Lu Ye is hiding inside, but we can't force our way in. Why? Song Jue was puzzled. Since they were sure that Lu Ye was hiding inside, even if so many myriad demons-rich cultivators rushed in, Lu Ye would undoubtedly die. Inside there is a mine tunnel that winds for several miles. It connects to a hollowed-out mine. Lu Ye left a large number of explosive Dharma formations in that mine tunnel. Some people have already tried to rush in, but they either died or were injured. Even that person over there did not succeed. Ning Zizai pointed in a direction as he spoke. Song Jue turned his head and saw a man sitting cross-legged on the ground. This man's physique was extremely strong. Even if he was sitting cross-legged on the ground, he was only shorter than the nearby cultivators by a head. One could imagine how tall he would be if he stood up. With such a physique, there was no doubt that he was a physique cultivator, and he was definitely an extremely powerful one. However, this physique cultivator was covered in blood, and his face was slightly pale. It seemed that his injuries were not light. Wei Zhong. Song Jue's eyes narrowed slightly. Even if he was a cultivator from the first-grade sect Abyss Rainbow Hall, he did not dare to underestimate this guy named Wei Zhong. Song Jue had some understanding of this person's strength. In a one-on-one fight, he was not confident that he could defeat him. Moreover, he was a physique cultivator, so his physique was incomparably strong. If he was still in such a state after forcing his way into the mine tunnel, the others would definitely end up worse. That narrow space undoubtedly increased the power of the explosion array. Otherwise, it would not have injured a ninth-order physique cultivator like this. Many people had tried to enter the mine tunnel before, but there were casualties every time. After this physique cultivator named Wei Zhong was forced to retreat, no one dared to try again. So now, all the myriad demons-rich cultivators were waiting here. We can't continue like this. Songja frowned. Isn't Yanshi here? We can let Yanshi use her creations to explore the path, trigger the array, and clear the obstacles. We've tried, but it's useless. Ning Zizai shook his head. Lu Ye's array is controlled, not triggered. If that was the case, then Yanshi's creations would not be of much use and might even mislead the cultivators. Imagine the cultivators would think that the creator's creations were safe enough. But when they stepped into the mine, the explosion array would suddenly trigger, causing another batch of deaths and injuries. The current situation was really a bit awkward. Lu Ye was seriously injured and was blocked by many myriad demons-rich cultivators in the mine tunnel, but because of the various arrays he had set up in advance, no one dared to enter at will. They could only be in a stalemate with him. Although there was no need to worry about Lu Ye escaping, delaying like this was not a solution. The longer they delayed, the more the other party's injuries would heal. At that time it would not be so easy to kill him. As if reading Song Jue's thoughts, Ning Zizai said, Brother Song, don't worry, someone is already on the way. Who? I wonder if Brother Song has heard of the name Sinan. Song Jue raised his brow. Sinan of Cloud Gem Sect? Ning Zizai chuckled. It seems that Brother Song has also heard of him. Song Jue nodded. I've long heard that this generation of Cloud Gem Sect has a genius, but I've never had the chance to meet him. It turns out that he's also nearby. If he comes, he may be able to compete with Lu Ye in the Array Dao. Cloud Gem Sect was a 4th grade sect. However, although there was only a 1-grade difference between 4th grade and 3rd grade, the difference was like heaven and earth. 3rd grade sects had great cultivators in the Divine Sea realm, but 4th grade sects did not. The structure of the cultivation world of the 9 regions and the way of recruiting disciples often led to a phenomenon, that was, the stronger the cultivator, the higher the aptitude of the disciples recruited by the more powerful sections. Therefore, for any sect it was not a simple matter to raise the level of the sect. Chapter 627. This was the way of the world. Often many 4th grade sects worked hard for more than 10 generations, and still might not have a chance to advance to the 3rd grade. The cultivation below the true lake realm was all about the continuous improvement of one's cultivation. As long as one had enough aptitude and resources, it was not too difficult. However, advancing from the true lake realm to the spirit sea realm was a huge hurdle, because it involved the transformation of one's divine soul. There were many spirit sea realm cultivators in Jojo, but they were all accumulated from generation to generation. It was often as difficult as ascending to heaven for a sect below the 3rd grade to have a spirit sea realm cultivator. However, there were exceptions. There were countless sects in Jojo, and every 3 years, there would be a spirit sea realm cultivator advancing from the 4th grade to the 3rd grade. Every time this happened, it meant that a spirit sea realm cultivator was born in a 4th grade sect. In recent years, the Yunlang sect was the most promising sect to be promoted to the 3rd grade because there was a genius named Sinan in the sect. He was a Dharma cultivator, but he also cultivated formation Taoism. Moreover, he was very talented in formation Taoism. Some cultivators of the Demon's Ridge once compared him with Lu Yi. They all agreed that among this generation of cultivators, he was the only one who could compete with Lu Yi in formation Taoism. This evaluation naturally fell into Sinan's ears, but he was dismissive of it. The cultivators of the Demon's Ridge had already placed him in a weak position. What he wanted was not to compete with them, but to surpass them. He was not originally nearby, but had rushed over from a very far place. As early as when the news of Lu Ye's spiritual land was leaked, he had already set off, but the journey was too far, so he had not arrived yet. Now the timing was just right. Lu Yi was trapped in the mine tunnel, and needed a powerful formation cultivator to break the formation he had set up. It could be said that he was now carrying all the hope of the Demon's Ridge. This was also one of the reasons why many cultivators of the Demon's Ridge were willing to wait here patiently. Hearing that Sinan was on the way, Song Jue was relieved and asked, "Who was the first to find out about this?" Ning Zizai pointed his finger. "A few people over there, but they don't know much." Song Jue looked in the direction and saw that there were indeed a few cultivators with low cultivation. One of them seemed to be slightly injured. He immediately nodded and flew over. Senior brother Qin was very helpless. Ever since more and more myriad Demon's Ridge cultivators rushed here, people kept coming to ask him all kinds of details, such as how they found this mine, how they were sure that Lu Ye was hiding inside. After dealing with wave after wave, there was no end to it. Lu Yi had indeed held back when he set up the spirit arrays, mainly because he was afraid that the power of the spirit arrays would erupt too violently and cause the mine to collapse. Now, he had left many explosive spirit arrays in the mine, and although the power they released was fierce, it was not enough to cause the mine to collapse. Of course, the surrounding rock walls would definitely become loose as a result. This was also part of his plan to make it easier to pull in the net when the time came. "I'll continue to keep an eye on them," Yi said before burrowing into the ground again and flying out. The convenience of having a spirit body was beyond imagination, and Yi rarely appeared in front of outsiders. The world only knew that Lu Yi had a snow-white little beast with him, but few people knew that in addition to Hu Pa, there was also Yi. Time passed by, and about half a day later, Yi suddenly sent a message saying that a very powerful array cultivator had come from Myriad Devil Ridge. Even Song Jue and the other 9th Order cultivators were very enthusiastic about this array cultivator, and had now entered the mine to begin cracking the spirit arrays left behind by Lu Yi. It was not that no array cultivators had tried to crack the spirit arrays laid down by Lu Yi before, but those array cultivators' attainments in the spirit array Dao were not high. They failed to crack the spirit arrays and instead suffered some casualties, which led to no array cultivators daring to act rashly. Now, a new array cultivator that Song Jue and the others were so enthusiastic about had suddenly appeared. Obviously, his background was extraordinary, and Song Jue and the others had high hopes for him. Sure enough, this array cultivator's attainments in the spirit array Dao were far beyond those of the previous array cultivators, and he easily cracked the explosion spirit arrays. When this news came, Lu Yi could not help but be surprised. Although he had held back when he set up the spirit arrays, he did not expect that there would be an array cultivator at the Cloud River realm who could crack his spirit arrays. He originally thought that Myriad Devil Ridge would eventually have no choice but to force their way into the mine. As long as some 8th or 9th order cultivators walked in front with enough protection, they would be able to push forward bit by bit, destroy his spirit arrays completely, and finally kill their way into the mine. But he did not expect that such a person would appear in Myriad Devil Ridge. Sure enough, plans could not keep up with changes. But the impact was not big. When the news that Sinan only spent a dozen breaths to dismantle an explosion array spread out, the cultivators of the Myriad Demon's Ridge who were waiting outside the mine exclaimed and praised him. Song Jue and the other 9th order cultivators also finally relaxed. Sure enough, a person with a great reputation lived up to his name. Now that Ing Wuji was gone, no one would cooperate with him, so there was no need to think about the reward anymore. In that case, he could only take a step back and prioritize killing Lu Yi. As for the rest, it was not important. Chapter 628. After listening to Song Jue's words, several 9th order cultivators understood what he meant. Ning Zizai nodded. Brother Song is right. There are too many fellow Taoists here this time. Whether Sinan takes 40% or 20%, it really doesn't affect us much. In that case, let's do as he says. What do you think? Now they had no objection. They didn't think of this before. Now that the situation was pointed out by Song Jue, they suddenly felt a little bored. Originally, killing Lu Yi was both a matter of fame and profit. But in the current situation, even if they killed Lu Yi in the end, the only thing that the cultivators of the Myriad Devil Ridge would remember would be Sinan's reputation for breaking the formation. All the benefits would go to this guy. He cursed in his heart. Lu Yi knows that he has no chance to live, so why did he still arrange so many spirit arrays in the mine tunnel? If you have no objection, I will send someone to inform Sinan. Song Jue motioned to a junior brother next to him as he spoke. The junior brother understood and immediately rushed in the direction of the mine tunnel. After entering, he saw Sinan waiting quietly and didn't continue to break the spirit arrays, so he informed the 9th order cultivators of their decision. Sinan smiled. I know. Please tell these fellow Taoists that I will break all the spirit arrays here within a day, and Lu Yi will have nowhere to hide. With the promise of several 9th order cultivators, Sinan was full of energy and continued to break the spirit arrays. In only half an hour, Sinan had penetrated hundreds of meters into the mine tunnel alone, and broken more than a dozen spirit arrays. This was a position that no Myriad Demon's Ridge cultivator had ever penetrated before. Inside the mine tunnel, Sinan kept breaking the spirit arrays. Outside the mine tunnel, many Myriad Demon's Ridge cultivators were looking forward to it. Some of them were more impatient and had been following Sinan, but they didn't dare to get too close. They kept a distance of about 10 meters to observe. They might not be able to see anything, but as they continued to spread the news, the progress of breaking the spirit arrays was also known to the cultivators waiting outside, causing bursts of cheers and exclamations from time to time. Song Jue and the others were still gathered together. The exclamations and cheers coming from time to time made them feel quite uncomfortable. Those voices should have belonged to them, but Sinan had stolen the limelight. Their resentment toward Lu Yi grew stronger. At this rate, we can indeed break through all the formations within a day. Amazing! Song Jue could not help but praise. The other 9th order masters did not comment. Song Jue laughed. All right everyone. It's hard for our 10,000 Demons Ridge to produce a talent that can match up to Lu Yi. We should be happy. After tomorrow there will be no more Lu Yi in this world, and we can peacefully advance to the true lake stage. The Cloudy River battlefield will also return to its original state, and will no longer be stirred up by one person. Ning Zizai smiled. Brother Song is still the one who thinks things through. Song Jue said. Some things can't be changed and can only be accepted. Isn't that so? In the mine, Sinan was breaking the array. In the mine, Lu Yi was setting up the array. From time to time, he would check the information sent by Yi, keeping track of the progress of the array cultivator who had suddenly arrived. Ning Zizai had to admit that this array cultivator, who had suddenly appeared, was really good in the Tao of arrays. He was almost at 70 to 80% of Ning Zizai's level. A large part of his attainments in the Tao of arrays came from the gift of the 100-array tower. The other reason was that he was a spirit tattoo master, so he had a natural advantage in the Tao of arrays. Lu Yi, on the other hand, had cultivated painstakingly, so it was not easy to compare. Time passed by, and as the spirit arrays in the mine continued to be broken, Sinan's position became deeper and deeper. The 10,000 demons rich cultivators waiting outside also began to rub their palms together. So far, although they could conclude that Lu Yi was hiding in the mine, no one had seen him. Whether he was really inside or not, they had to wait for Sinan to break all the spirit arrays before they could verify it. Until a certain moment, a muffled sound suddenly came from the depths of the mine. The violent sound was accompanied by a strong vibration, causing the 10,000 demons rich cultivators waiting outside to change their expressions. What's going on? Song Jue and the other Ninth Order masters immediately turned to look in the direction of the mine with a solemn expression. This was clearly a sign that the explosion array had been activated. Did Sinan fail? Such a thought immediately popped up in the minds of these people. If the spirit array had been broken, it would not have been activated. Since it had been activated, it must be because Sinan had failed. There was no need to worry that he would be killed by the explosion. Sinan was an 8th order cultivator. Even if he was a Dharma cultivator, an explosion array would not kill him. However, injuries were inevitable. As a result, the progress of breaking the spirit array would definitely be delayed. Just as these people were thinking this, a message suddenly came from inside the mine. It was not that Sinan had failed, but that the explosion array had been activated by someone. Obviously, it was the work of the person who arranged the spirit array. As for Sinan, he was unscathed because the spirit array directly exploded when Sinan approached it. This change confused everyone. They did not know what was going on. It sounded like the person who arranged the spirit array wanted to plot against Sinan, but failed to grasp the timing and activated the spirit array in advance. Hong. Another sound came from inside the mine. What happened? The 10,000 demons rich cultivators, who had just calmed down, became nervous again. Things had developed to this extent, and no one wanted any unexpected changes to happen. However, the sudden explosion undoubtedly worried them. Hong. The third sound. Hong. The fourth sound. Then the fifth sound. There was at least some time between the first few sounds, but the following sounds were continuous and showed no signs of stopping. Even though they had just heard that Sinan was safe and sound, the group of 10,000 demons rich cultivators was still worried. This kind of movement was clearly caused by the continuous activation of the explosion array. The continuous sound made the stone wall outside shake violently. Soon news came from inside the mine that Sinan was still safe and sound. All the spirit arrays were activated by the person who arranged them. At this moment, Sinan was striding forward. As he moved forward, many spirit arrays in front of him exploded one after another. This was the source of the movement. At this moment in the mine, Sinan was strolling leisurely with a disdainful smile on his face. It was rumored that Lu Ye's attainments in Formation Tao were extremely high, but now it seemed that this was not the case. He had cracked many spirit arrays along the way. As long as he was given enough time, he would be able to crack all the spirit arrays. Obviously, the other party had also noticed this, so he directly activated the power of the spirit arrays. Therefore, at this moment the scene in the mine was that Sinan kept walking forward, and in front of him the power of the explosion array was constantly being activated. Balls of fire emerged, and from the surrounding rock walls rubble rustled down. Is this the end of the road? Sinan murmured. He secretly guessed that the other party did not do this to kill him, because he knew that it was impossible. Since they didn't want to blow him up, the only possibility was that they wanted to collapse the tunnel in exchange for more time to survive. Combined with the rumor that Lu Ye was seriously injured, Sinan was more and more certain of this conjecture. But how could he give Lu Yi such an opportunity? Song Jue and the others had already promised him that he would get 40% of the reward for killing Lu Yi this time. Although it was just a verbal promise from a few Ninth Order Realm Masters, no one else was qualified to object. Such a huge bounty was of great significance to the sect behind him. As Sinan continued to move forward, the myriad demon-rich cultivators who followed behind him to watch the fun were dazzled and full of admiration. From their point of view, it was as if Sinan was alone, sweeping through all the obstacles in front of him with infinite power. The news in the mine spread. Song Jue and the others were taken aback for a moment before they all rushed towards the mine tunnel. They had thought that it would take at least 1 or 2 days for Sinan to break the tactical matrix, but now it seemed that it would not take long for them to enter the mine. Lu Yi was hiding in the mine. Although no one expected anything from the reward, there was always an end to everything. They had spent a lot of energy and time chasing after Lu Yi. Now that they had reached the final juncture, naturally no one wanted to miss it. Several Ninth Order Realm Masters led a group of people and quickly rushed into the mine tunnel. Only then did the other myriad demon-rich cultivators react and enter one after another. For a time the mine tunnel was filled with people. After all, the mine tunnel was not spacious. At most it could only accommodate 3 to 5 people walking side by side. Naturally, there was no shortage of disputes. For a time the scene was very lively. From time to time, the panicked cries of some female cultivators could be heard. Obviously, someone had accidentally taken advantage of them. Outside the mine tunnel, Senior Brother Qin, Senior Sister Hu, and the others also hurriedly got up, but before they could move, Ghost Shadow suddenly raised his hand and grabbed Senior Brother Qin's arm while pressing his chest with his other hand. His face suddenly turned pale. Junior brother? Senior Brother Qin turned his head to look at Ghost Shadow, wondering why he suddenly became like this. Ghost Shadow raised his head. His eyes were bloodshot and his face was filled with fear, as if he had seen something extremely terrible. He gritted his teeth and said, "Senior brother, you can't go." When they were waiting here before, Ghost Shadow had repeatedly persuaded them not to get involved in this matter because he always had a trace of uneasiness in his heart. In addition, this matter involved Lu Yi. The few times he had interacted with Lu Yi, they were all accompanied by great risks. This made Ghost Shadow even more certain that something was wrong this time. But how could Senior Brother Qin, Senior Sister Hu, and the others be willing to not participate in such a grand event? Besides, it was their team that discovered Lu Yi's whereabouts. No matter what, they should be able to get a share of the reward after killing Lu Yi. If they shrank back at this time, they would get nothing. Therefore, even if Ghost Shadow had persuaded them before, Senior Brother Qin and the others did not take it to heart. In their opinion, Lu Yi was dead for sure with more than 20 million devil-rich cultivators gathered here. They might not be able to do much, but it was not a problem to join in the fun. Until now. Chapter 629. Coming from the same sect, Senior Brother Qin and the others had some understanding of Ghost Shadow's abilities. This Ghost Cultivator Junior Brother had a perception of hidden dangers that ordinary people couldn't compare to. Take the previous encounter in the mine as an example. If Ghost Shadow hadn't suddenly sensed it and warned them in time, Senior Brother Qin, who was walking at the front, wouldn't have just suffered light injuries. "What did you sense?" Senior Brother Qin asked. Ghost Shadow's eyes turned even redder. He shook his head and said, "I don't know, but it's very dangerous." Ever since he had started cultivating, this talent had allowed him to avoid many fatal dangers. In the Spirit Stream battlefield, in the Myriad Poisons Forest, and in the Cloud River battlefield, Ghost Shadow had always sensed danger ahead of time and promptly left. Reality had proven that it was precisely this caution that had allowed him to avoid calamities time and time again, allowing him to use his meager cultivation to turn danger into safety time and time again. Those who liked to join in on the fun, those who enjoyed watching a show, and those who had a higher cultivation than him, had long since died. But there had never been a time when Ghost Shadow felt such a strong sense of danger in his heart. This made him faintly feel that if they really entered the mine, the danger this time would be more dangerous than any of the previous times. Senior brother Qin was still hesitating, and senior sister who was also indecisive. Ghost Shadow advised senior brother, "There are so many people involved this time. Even if we succeed in the end, we won't get much of the benefits. It's not worth taking the risk for that little bit of benefit. Even if I'm wrong, we'll only lose a little bit of resources. But what if I'm right?" If he was right, then it was equivalent to avoiding a disaster in advance. These words undoubtedly moved senior brother Qin. He patted Ghost Shadow's hand and nodded. "All right, then we'll wait outside." Ghost Shadow let out a sigh of relief. To be honest, if senior brother Qin didn't listen to his advice and insisted on going in, he really didn't have any good ideas. At most, he could only ensure that he didn't participate in this matter. He couldn't force others to do anything, even if they were fellow disciples. Fortunately, this senior brother of his was also willing to listen to others' advice. Senior sister who said, "Should we also warn them?" Senior brother Qin shook his head. Who would believe that? The myriad demon-rich cultivators gathered here were like cats that had smelled blood. They swarmed into the tunnel. It was fine if they didn't go in, but if they reminded others now, they would only be mocked. Others might even think that they had ulterior motives. The number of cultivators outside became fewer and fewer. In the end, only senior brother Qin's group of 5 remained. The originally noisy environment suddenly became quiet, making people feel a little uncomfortable. The dull sounds continued to come from the depths of the mine tunnel. Song Jue and the others had caught up with Sinan, who was walking in the front, and saw the amazing scene. Sinan kept walking forward. In front of him, explosive tactical deployments were constantly activated, which made the surrounding rock walls loose, and gravel rustled down. They immediately came to the same conclusion as Sinan. The person who set up the formation clearly realized that the formation he had set up could no longer stop Sinan, so he wanted to use these formations to blow up the mine tunnel and buy himself some time. However, the power of this tactical deployment was not enough. Therefore, although the mine tunnel was now full of gravel, it was still stable. As long as there was no more external force, it would not collapse in a short time. Besides, even if one part of the tunnel collapsed, it would not be a big deal. All the cultivators present were at the Cloud River realm. As long as they were not buried alive on the spot, they would not be in any danger. As long as they spent some time and energy, they would eventually clear the tunnel. After a few miles of winding mine tunnel, there was finally an end. When the buzzing of the explosive tactical deployments stopped, and the last ball of fire was annihilated, a hollowed-out mine appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Sinan was the first to step in, followed by Song Jue and the others. Behind them, there was an endless stream of cultivators from the myriad demon ridge. The mine tunnel was pitch black, but Song Jue and the others still felt a familiar aura at once. They all raised their eyes and looked in that direction. Someone cast a spell. The spell was not very destructive, but it was incomparably bright. It slowly rose into the air, like a rising sun. Under the cover of the light, the situation of the entire mine tunnel was clear at a glance. The mine tunnel was full of miscellaneous stones, and the space was not small. In the deepest part of the mine tunnel, a figure was sitting cross-legged, wearing a blood-red robe. The blood on the robe had long dried up, making the blood-red robe hard. He sat there quietly, looking at the group of uninvited guests who had suddenly rushed in. "Luya!" A low shout came from the crowd, and there was an urgent commotion. Although many cultivators from the Myriad Demon Ridge could basically conclude that the person hiding here was Luya. After all, no one had seen him with their own eyes. At this moment, the person they had been thinking about finally appeared in their field of vision. As soon as the voice fell, streams of spells and imperial tools broke through the space and attacked Luya. However, the distance was still too far. Although Luya's position was within their attack range, the power of the attacks had been greatly reduced by the time they reached Luya. A layer of light curtain suddenly appeared in front of Luya. It was a protective array. The weakened spells and imperial tools hit the protective array, and layers of ripples spread out, but they could not hurt him at all. They could not even break the protective array. The cultivators who attacked were full of unwillingness. They finally understood why Luya was hiding so far away. Someone shouted angrily, "Luya, come and die!" Someone also shouted, Luya. Let's see where you can run this time. In such a closed environment, with such a great disparity in strength, in anyone's opinion, Luya had no hope of escaping unless he could ask the Tianji pillar again and use its power to escape back to the 9 provinces. However, at this moment, there was no trace of the Tianji pillar beside Luya. However, these people only shouted and did not dare to act rashly. Luya had set up so many arrays in the mine tunnel before. Who knew if there were any arrays in this mine tunnel? There must be. Before the arrays were broken, no one dared to act rashly. Song Jue leaned over to Sinan and whispered, Brother Sinan, Luya can set up a teleportation array. Can you see if there is one around him? Back in Huitian Valley, Luya used a teleportation array to leave. Although there was no such thing as the Tianji pillar, if Luya set up a teleportation array here in advance, he could still escape. However, this possibility was not high. According to the information he received, Luya inadvertently exposed his whereabouts and hid here to heal. There was no reason for him to set up a teleportation array, unless he had foreseen this scene and set up a backup plan in advance. Sinan looked carefully. After a while, he shook his head and said, I don't see any traces of a teleportation array, but we can't rule out the possibility that the other party deliberately concealed it. They were a little far away, so Sinan could not see too clearly. Song Jue said at this time if he really set up a teleportation array, he must have used it to escape. There is no need to hide it. Since we didn't see it, it must not be there. In such a desperate situation, Luya was going to die in the end. It was a pity that Ing Wuji failed in Huitian Valley. Otherwise, he would not have to worry about his cultivation resources in the future. It won't be easy to kill him. He has set up many arrays in this mine. Are you waiting for me to break the arrays or attack? Sinan asked. A trace of doubt suddenly appeared in his heart. Logically speaking, if the other party really wanted to resist stubbornly, the location of the mine entrance was the most suitable place to set up an array. However, in fact, there was no array left at the entrance of the mine. It was as if the other party had deliberately left a place for the myriad demons' rich cultivators to have a foothold. However, Sinan did not think too much about this matter. He just thought that the other party did not have enough array flags. In the mine tunnel, the other party had set up too many arrays, so the number of array flags consumed must be huge. At this moment, there were still a steady stream of myriad demons' rich cultivators coming out of the mine tunnel and stepping into the mine. After all, there were nearly 2,000 people in the mine tunnel, so it would take some time for all of them to come in. Song Jue said, breaking the array is safe, but it will take a long time. Luya is treacherous, so this matter should not be delayed for too long. What do you think? The last sentence was directed to the other 9th Order realm cultivators. Ning Zizai said, Brother Song, you can make the decision. Wei Zhong and the other 2 9th Order realm cultivators had no opinion. Song Jue nodded. Then let's attack. In this way, although there might be some casualties, as long as they were careful enough, there should not be too much of a problem. With this in mind, Song Jue raised his arms and shouted, Fellow Taoists, Luya is right in front. If you want to share the bounty, follow me to break his array and take his life. Saying so, he took the lead and attacked the empty space in front of him. He really couldn't break the array like Sinan, nor could he see where the array was, but as long as he maintained enough power, he could flatten everything in front of him. Naturally, the hidden array wouldn't be able to play any role. He couldn't do it alone, but if all the myriad demons' rich cultivators worked together, no matter how many arrays Luya had set up here, they would eventually be destroyed. As Song Jue took action, many myriad demons' rich cultivators also took action. For a time, the spirit chi in the mine was in chaos, and colorful lights constantly bloomed. The blooming spirit chi plowed the ground in front of them over and over again, and all the hidden arrays were forcibly broken before they could be activated. There were also some impatient myriad demon-rich cultivators who leapt up, wanting to fly over and kill Luyi. However, before they could even reach 30 feet, a massive pressure descended from the sky, suffocating them. Shockingly, there was also a forbidden space formation set up within the mine. Thunderous rumbling filled the air. The cultivators of the myriad demon ridge rushed into the mine in an arc, constantly attacking and pushing forwards. Bit by bit, they closed in on Lu Ye's direction, bringing with them an aura that left one filled with despair. To be continued. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.